Come here, dear, sit a little closer to me. I can see you're still young. What are you, not even 30 yet? At my age now, 79, mind you, everyone looks young to me. This white hair of mine, these tired eyes, these trembling hands, they all prove one thing. My time on this earth isn't much longer. Do you see this little house? These yellowing walls? Those old photographs hanging crooked on the shelves? This is where I've lived for nearly 60 years now, from when I got married until now, all alone. This house holds so many memories, but it also holds a secret I've never dared tell anyone. Child, today I want to tell you a true story, the story of my own life. Not some made-up tale or something I heard somewhere, but what I've lived through, what I've witnessed with my own eyes. What I'm about to tell you might shock you, but I swear on everything holy that it's all the honest truth. I have nothing left to lose or hide anymore. I'm old now, about to meet my maker, so what's the point of hiding anything? My body is tired, my heart is heavy with secrets I've carried for over 60 years. This house has been my companion through joy and sorrow, but mostly sorrow. Are you ready to listen to an old woman's confession? Because what I'm about to share will change how you see everything. It's time someone knew the truth about Patricia Miller. My name is Patricia Miller. I am 79 years old, born in 1944, well-lived and poorly slept. You're going to hear things that might shock you, but it's the honest truth. I have nothing left to lose or hide. My hair is white, my body is tired, and my time to face my maker is approaching. That's why I decided to tell the biggest scandal of my life, what I've carried in my heart for over 60 years. If it were today, it would have been different, but back then, a woman had no choice. She was her father's property, then her husband's, and if God had no mercy, she ended up being the property of any man who had enough power to take her. A beautiful woman in a small town was like honey to bees, and I was too beautiful for my own good. God knows I suffered, but I also know I sinned. I loved who I shouldn't, at the time I shouldn't, in the way I shouldn't, and I paid a price you can't even imagine. But I also know that if I had to live it all again, I would make the same choices, because some things are stronger than us, and we are who we are. This story begins when I was 13 years old and thought I knew something about life. What a foolish child I was. I was born in 1944 into a family so poor that poverty felt like a luxury compared to us. My father, Samuel, was a small, quiet man, always bowed by the weight of life and the fear of losing his job on the land baron's ranch. My mother, Eleanor, was a strong woman who carried other people's laundry to the creek and came back with her back aching from so much scrubbing and beating. There were 9 of us children, can you believe it? 9 mouths to feed in a house where there was barely room for hunger. I was the 4th child, and from a young age, everyone said I was different from the others. Not because I was smarter or more hardworking, but because I was born beautiful. My parents named me Patricia after my father's German grandmother, who had been known for her beauty in the old country. Perhaps that's why the German blood showed so strongly in me. While my 8 siblings all took after my mother with dark hair, dark skin, and brown eyes, I was the spitting image of my father's German heritage. My hair was golden like ripe corn silk, and my eyes were blue as an April sky, with fair skin that drew attention even in church. This unusual appearance would prove to be both my blessing and my curse, marking me as different in ways that would shape my entire destiny. Our house was a shack with a dirt floor, a single room that separated where the parents slept from the rest of the family. There was no electricity, no running water, nothing that any poor family has nowadays. Water came from the well, which was 100 yards from the house, carried in old kerosene cans by the small ones, and the older ones carried heavy buckets. Food was rice, beans, and flour. Meat was only for Christmas, if God helped. Many people think that those who live in the countryside, in rural Florida, never go hungry, that they always have something to eat from their own land. What a lie. We planted for others, worked on other people's land, and the little that was left barely sustained the family. Many times, we went to sleep with only water and sugar in our stomachs, and my mother would say it was fasting to purify the soul. Purify nothing. It was just hunger. But she had to invent something so we wouldn't feel angry at God. Hunger in the countryside is worse than in the city, Because besides having no food, you still have to hear that you should, that the land gives everything. The land did give, but not for us. I started working at 8 years old, helping my mother by the creek. I carried loads of laundry, hung them on the clothesline, ironed with a cast iron that weighed more than me. My hands became calloused before I learned to read my own name. In fact, I only learned to read properly at 32, after everything I'm going to tell you. When I was barely 14, still a child who knew nothing of life, they arranged a marriage for me with a 40-year-old widower who had a small ranch and needed a woman to take care of the house. He had 5 children from his previous marriage, all older than me, and married. They didn't live with their father, but when they visited, they looked at me as if I were an intruder. I didn't even really know what it meant to be married, but back then, women didn't ask questions, they just obeyed. I got married on a Thursday morning, without a party, without a white dress, without anything, just a pastor's blessing, and that was it. I was a married woman. On the first night, he took me to the room and did what he wanted with me, without explaining anything, without any tenderness. I knew nothing about such things between a man and a woman. It hurt, it bled, and he didn't even care. The only good thing about that house was that there was never a lack of food. He had a good ranch and livestock. We didn't suffer hardship. The man's name was Theodore. He was ugly as sin, and on top of that, unhinged. He would hit me when the food wasn't the way he wanted it. He would hit me when I took too long to wash the clothes. He would hit me whenever he felt like it. An entire year of being beaten, working like a pack animal, and still hearing that I wasn't even fit to clean the floor his deceased wife walked on. But God had pity on me and took him away. It was a fever that came on in a week, and in 10 days he was under the ground. I pretended to be sad at the funeral, but inside I was relieved. At 15, I was a widow and free again, or so I thought. No sooner had his body cooled than his children appeared to divide the inheritance. They sent me away the same week as the funeral, saying I had no right to anything, that I was just an intruder. I left that house with nothing but the clothes on my back. I went back to my parents' house, poorer than when I left. I didn't understand anything, and neither did my family, so we didn't even try to find out about my rights. And it was when I returned to my parents' house that destiny knocked on my door, and destiny had a name and a surname, James Miller. Land Baron Jeremiah Miller owned half the town and the other half too, only no one talked about it. A 52-year-old man, married for 30 years to Catherine. He had 8 legitimate children, 6 sons and 2 daughters. He owned more land than the eye could see, the bank, the county clerk's office, the sheriff's station, the sheriff, the mayor, the judge, all ate out of his hand. My father had worked on the land baron's estate since he was a boy, just like his father and his grandfather. It was an entire family of subordinates, people born to serve and die serving. The land baron paid a pittance, but it was guaranteed work, and there were no other options in the region. Everyone knew that the land baron was violent. He had already ordered beatings for workers who complained. He had already expelled entire families from their lands because someone looked at him sideways. He had a reputation for having several mistresses scattered throughout the region, and no one ever said anything, because those who talked too much ended up having problems, serious problems. 2 families had died burned in their own homes years before. No one ever knew who did it, but everyone suspected it had been the land baron sending a message. That's how things worked there. Those who had power did what they wanted, and those who didn't kept silent and were grateful to be alive. In January 1962, the news arrived that James Miller, the land baron's eldest son, was returning from Orlando after finishing his studies. The young man was 22 years old and had gone to study law in Orlando. They said he was different from his father, more educated, with other ideas about how to treat workers. I was taking clean laundry to the mansion when I saw him for the first time. My goodness, what a handsome man. Tall, dark-haired, with clear eyes like spring water. He wore silk clothes that cost more than my entire family earned in a year. He spoke differently, with a city accent, beautiful words I had never heard. When he saw me carrying the bundle of laundry, he stopped and spoke to me. He didn't speak like other men, full of malice and disrespect. He spoke as if I were a person, as if I were worth something. He asked my name, where I was from, if I was well. Simple things, but no one had ever asked if I was well. "What is a young lady doing carrying such a heavy load?" he asked. I didn't know what to answer. A rich man talking to me. That wasn't right. But there was something in his eyes that made me stand there like a fool. "I work for my family, sir," was all I could manage to say. He smiled in a way that made my heart pound. I felt something I had never felt before, a heat rising from my stomach and taking over my entire chest. Was it love? Was it desire? Was it damnation? I don't know what it was, but I know that's where my life changed forever. After that first encounter at the mansion, I started inventing excuses to take laundry more often. My mother found it strange that I wanted to work so much, but I always gave some justification. The truth was that I wanted to see if I would meet James again, and I did. He was also looking for me. Whenever he saw me carrying the bundles, he would come to help, taking the weight from my hands. At first, it was just a few words exchanged, him asking if I was well, me answering yes. But little by little, we talked more. He told me about his studies in the city, about the things he had seen there. I listened fascinated, because for me, that was another world. He also talked about how he found life in the countryside different, simpler, truer than in the big city. "You have very beautiful eyes, Patricia," he said one day when we were talking near the creek. I turned red as a pepper. No man had ever said such a thing to me, at least not in the respectful way he said it. It was that day it happened. We were there talking. He came closer, and suddenly, he gave me a quick, stolen kiss that made my heart pound, and I returned the kiss. God forgive me. From then on, we started meeting on purpose, always in the same places: the dense woods behind the church, an abandoned house near the creek, a clearing in the middle of the pasture. Places where no one went, where no one could see us. He would arrive on his horse. I would go on foot, barefoot, afraid someone would see me. Things happened slowly between us. First, there were the kisses, then the caresses over our clothes. James always asked if I was okay, if I wanted to stop. What a difference from Theodore, who simply used me as an object. With James, when we finally gave ourselves to each other, it was different. He was affectionate, careful. He explained things to me. He was patient. For the first time in my life, I understood that what happened between a man and a woman could be good, it could be pleasurable, it could be love. It wasn't just pain and obligation, as it had been with my husband. It was true love, not this fleeting infatuation that young people today think is love. He treated me as if I were a princess. He talked about taking me away, about building a different life far from there. I believed every word, like a child believes in Santa Claus. "One day I'll take you out of here, Patricia," he would say. "One day we'll live in a big city where no one will care where you came from." I knew it wouldn't work out, but the heart doesn't listen to reason. A woman in love is deaf, blind, and foolish. And I was in love down to my last hair. For 8 months, I lived between paradise and hell. Paradise when I was with James, hell when apart from him. We met in the late afternoons when he finished ranch work and I could slip away unnoticed. He talked about life in the city, about the things he had seen, about the books he had read. I listened like a thirsty person listening to the sound of rain. For me, who couldn't even read, that was like getting to know another world. A world where people had choices, where women could study, where love didn't have to hide. "In Orlando, Patricia, people marry for love," he would say. Not out of obligation, not for convenience, but for true love. I would close my eyes and imagine what a house of our own would be like, children we chose to have, freedom to come and go. It was a dream too beautiful to be true. But a small town is like a pressure cooker. Everything boils together, and when it explodes, nothing is left whole. The gossip started slowly. A neighbor saw me returning late from the woods. Another noticed that I was happier and more dressed up, Mrs. Gable, the town's biggest gossip, began to spread rumors that the widow, Samuel's daughter, was being very flirtatious. My father began to suspect. A submissive man, but he wasn't foolish. He saw that I was different, that I was leaving the house more than usual. One night he came close to me and spoke softly so my mother wouldn't hear. "Girl, you're getting involved in something you shouldn't." I denied it, of course. But he kept an eye on me. He started controlling my hours, asking where I was going, who I was talking to. The fear of losing his job was eating him up inside. "If you do something foolish, we'll all pay," he said once. "The land baron doesn't forgive disrespect." But I was blind with love. I thought we were clever, that no one would find out. How foolish I was. In a small town, everyone knows everything. They just pretend not to until it's time to use the information. James had also changed, more nervous, more hurried in our meetings. He knew the situation was getting dangerous, but he couldn't stay away from me either. He talked even more about taking me away and fleeing far. "My father can't find out, Patricia," he would say. "If he finds out, it'll be the end of everything." I asked what the problem was, if he wasn't the land baron's son, if he didn't have the right to choose who he was with. How naive I was, as if love had anything to do with rights. "You don't know my father," he replied. "He's capable of anything to maintain control. He would never accept my relationship with you. Every meeting could be the last, and we knew it. So, we savored every minute, every kiss, every caress. It was happiness I didn't even know existed, but it was also the constant fear that everything would be discovered. I already knew I was digging my own grave, but I couldn't stop. It was stronger than me. It was as if James had become the air I breathed. Without him, I would suffocate. And it was precisely at that time that the land baron discovered everything. I was helping my mother hang clothes in the yard when two of the land baron's enforcers arrived on horseback. Big, mean-looking men that everyone knew by sight and feared. "The land baron wants to speak with Samuel's family," one of them said. My father was on the ranch, but they sent my brother Isaac to call him running. When he arrived, he was sweaty and looked like he already knew disaster had struck. We all gathered in the yard of the house, all 9 children, my parents. The land baron arrived shortly after, mounted on a black horse that looked like the devil's own beast. He dismounted slowly, looking at each of us as if choosing which one he would step on first. When his eyes stopped on me, I felt a chill down my spine that I never forgot. "Samuel," he said with that deep voice that scared even dogs, "your daughter has been meeting with my son." My father turned white as a sheet, lowered his head, and couldn't say anything. My mother began to cry softly. In that way, women cry when they know tragedy has arrived and there's nothing more to do. "Land baron, I didn't know anything." My father managed to say, "If I had, I would have found a way." "Calm down, Samuel," the land baron said with a smile that I couldn't interpret. "I didn't come here to argue. I came here to make a proposal." He looked at me and then at my parents. "You know that my son, James, is interested in your daughter. A young man, educated, with modern ideas. He came to talk to me yesterday." The land baron paused dramatically. "He said he likes Patricia, but that she needs to learn some things first, to refine herself a little, you understand?" My parents were open-mouthed. I managed to arrange for her to go learn fine sewing with a French lady who lives in a neighboring town, Mrs. Beaumont, a widow of a rich merchant. She teaches the daughters of high society how to sew, embroider, behave like a lady. He smiled. James said that if Patricia comes back more sophisticated, more educated, he will ask her to marry him. The silence completely changed from fear to hope. "Good heavens," my mother whispered. "Our daughter married to the land baron's son. She'll learn French, good manners. She'll come back a lady." The land baron continued. "But she has to go today. Mrs. Beaumont doesn't like to wait. I arranged everything with her by phone. Land baron, it would be a blessing," my father said, almost crying with joy. "Then it's decided. Patricia, go pack your things. You're coming with me now." My family was beaming. I was going to study with a French lady. I was going to come back refined. I was going to marry James. It was more than any poor family could dream of. And I, in my naive girl's innocence, was as happy as they were. I believed every word of that demon. I thought, wow, How wrong James was about his father. I gathered the few clothes I had, kissed my siblings goodbye, hugged my parents who were crying with joy. I climbed onto the back of his horse and we rode off. My family stayed in the yard, waving, smiling, shouting blessings, praying for me to succeed in life. I kept looking back until we disappeared around the bend in the road. If only I had known what awaited me. The house he took me to was indeed a palace compared to what I knew. A beautiful mansion, good furniture, electric lights, a refrigerator purring in the corner. I thought it was temporary, that I would soon meet the French lady. As soon as I stepped into the living room, the man locked the door and turned to me. His smile changed completely, turning into something devilish. Now, my dear, I'm going to explain what your real job is here, and I'm also going to tell you what happens to that whole happy family if you're not a very, very obedient girl. That's when I understood I had fallen into a trap, that there was no going back. Land Baron? I managed to say, still not quite understanding. And the French lady? When do I start my sewing classes? And James? Does he know I'm here? The Land Baron let out a laugh that sent shivers down my spine. What French lady, foolish girl? What sewing classes? He came closer, and I smelled moonshine on his breath. My son knows nothing of what I invented for your family. The world collapsed in my head. The truth is, James just experimented with you, girl. It's a young man's thing, you know how it is. He smiled maliciously. When he got tired of the game, he came to talk to me. He said he had met a pretty, rustic blonde girl that I needed to know. Too pretty to be lost in a family of poor folk. He gave me the address of your house, told me everything about you, and now he's on his way to another city, where he'll work as our family's lawyer, far away from here. He must have already forgotten you exist. My legs buckled. James? James had handed me over to his father? He had talked about me as if I were an object he was tired of. Your function here is only one, to be my mistress, my property. And if you don't fulfill this function properly— He paused, looking out the window in the direction of my house. 2 families have already died in fires around here. It would be a shame if a third tragedy happened. The pain of betrayal hurt more than any threat. Now you're going to take a bath and get ready, he said, pointing to the bathroom. I want you clean and fragrant. I went like a zombie, still trying to understand that James had betrayed me, that everything had been a lie. I got undressed, but I didn't even know how to open that shower faucet. I had never seen one. Back in my deceased husband Theodore's house, I took baths with a bucket. I had to call the Land Baron to open it, but when he saw me undressed, he said he had understood the message and stayed right there, bathing me. Oh, how disgusting, just thinking about it. There was no conversation, no tenderness, nothing. It was pure violence, as if I were an animal. It was different even from Theodore, who at least was quick. The Land Baron seemed to want to humiliate me on purpose. When he finished, he dressed slowly, adjusted his hair in the mirror, and as he was leaving, he said, "My son was right. You really are a delicious little thing," and walked out laughing. Before leaving, he locked the door and took the keys. His visits were 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday, always at the same time, always with the same degrading routine. He would arrive, use my body as if it were an object, and then leave. There was no conversation, no tenderness, nothing that resembled affection. It was just violence, disguised as a relationship. Every Saturday morning, one of his enforcers would bring a cart full of groceries to the house: food, soap, cleaning products, sometimes new clothes. The man would unload everything in the kitchen without even looking at me. No good morning, no good afternoon, nothing. To him, I was invisible, or worse, I was the boss's mistress, something that deserved no respect. Every time the Land Baron came, before leaving, he made sure to remind me of the threats. "Always remember that your family is well because you are being obedient," he would say. After about 2 months of living locked up, he came with a novelty. "I won't lock the door anymore," he said, putting the key in his pocket. "You already understand how things work here. You can go out, you can go to the store, you can take a walk. But remember, I have eyes everywhere. If you try to escape, if you say anything you shouldn't, if you do anything foolish, your family will pay the price. It was a false freedom. I could leave the house, but I remained imprisoned by fear, by blackmail, by threats, a prison without bars, but one that hurt even more. I asked him if I could visit my family. "You will be able to visit your family," he said, "but tell them exactly what I order, not a word more, not a word less." The story he invented was this: the sewing course hadn't worked out. Mrs. Beaumont had been too demanding, complained about everything, and said I had no talent for learning. James, when he learned that I wasn't able to refine myself, lost interest and broke up with me. He said he needed a more educated, high society wife. But the land baron, being a kind and generous person, felt sorry for my situation and arranged a job for me taking care of one of his estates on a more secluded property. Honest, well-paying work, where I could have a dignified life, even after the disillusionment of love. "Everyone will think you're a domestic worker in a nice place," he explained. "And it's better that way. No one needs to know anything more." When I visited my family for the first time, I had to play the part perfectly, tell them I was working, earning well, that I had a good house to live in. My parents were sad about the James story, but relieved that I had a good job. "At least you weren't left helpless," my mother said. "The land baron is truly a good man." She even said that people talk too much. If she only knew. I couldn't talk about the threats. I couldn't tell the truth. I had to pretend everything was fine, that I was just a domestic worker in a nice mansion, and everyone in town bought that version, or at least pretended to. I had no close neighbors. It was just me and God in that place. All this talk from the land baron didn't last. In a small place, no secret lasts long. Women looked at me with disdain when I passed them on the street, some with pity, others with envy for the luxuries I had. But all knew that I was the land baron's mistress, and that marked me as a fallen woman. Even my own family distanced themselves, not out of malice, but out of shame and fear. My father couldn't look me in the eye anymore. My mother cried every time she saw me. My siblings pretended I didn't exist. It was the price of having saved their lives. One day, I couldn't bear to keep that secret anymore. I waited for my father on a path he always took returning from the ranch, far from the other workers. When I saw him approaching alone, I came out of the bush and called out, "Father, I need to talk to you." He was startled to see me there. "Girl, what are you doing here? Weren't you supposed to be working?" That's when I broke down. I told him everything. The lie about Mrs. Beaumont, how the land baron had deceived me, what he did to me 3 times a week, the threats against my family. I spoke, crying uncontrollably, all the pain I had been swallowing for months. My father turned white as a sheet, started trembling, then broke down crying like a child. He hugged me tightly, begging for forgiveness for believing that I had willingly become his mistress. My daughter, he repeated, sobbing. What a disaster, what a disaster. When he managed to speak clearly, he looked into my eyes with a sadness that broke my heart. "Daughter, you need to continue to please him. For God's sake, do not defy this man." His voice was broken. "If you run away, if he gets angry, he'll kill all of us. I know him. I know what he's capable of." With no other alternative, my father asked me to continue to please him to save our family. I agreed, but I was relieved to have finally told him. So, before leaving, I asked, "Don't tell Mom. Let her believe the lie. She doesn't deserve to know." He nodded yes, said goodbye, and continued on his way. That's when I understood that there was no salvation. What I was living was a living death. I soon discovered I was pregnant with my first child. I despaired, because I was going to bring a child into that miserable situation, and deep down, a little hope, because I thought having a child would humanize the land baron, would make him treat me better. The land baron was pleased, as if it were another proof of his possession over me. Marcus was born in March 1963, a strong, handsome boy who took after my blue eyes. On the birth certificate, there was no father's name, father unknown, as if I were some random woman who didn't even know who the father was. The land baron couldn't publicly acknowledge paternity. He had a wife, a reputation, social standing to maintain. To the world, I was just a single domestic worker who had gotten pregnant by some boyfriend, and he, out of kindness, was helping me with work and lodging. No one can know he's my son, he made very clear to everyone. You got involved with some man around here and got pregnant. I'm helping you out of Christian charity. During the pregnancy, he had been a little less cruel. I even thought that fatherhood would change him. What a mistake. After the boy was born, everything went back to how it was before, or worse. Now he used the child as another form of blackmail, but always in secret, always hidden. Raising a child in that situation was a crazy task. I loved my son with all the strength of my heart. In 1965, Olivia came, a delicate girl with my blue eyes and light hair. The land baron was disappointed because he wanted another son, but I thanked God for sending a healthy girl. That was all that mattered to me. Healthy children. The third child, Aiden, was born in 1968, also blonde like me. This time, the land baron didn't even show much interest. He was over 60, he no longer had the same energy as before, but he continued to use me as property. He didn't even come as often as before. He would come every 2 weeks. The years passed quickly for many people, certainly, but for me, each day was an eternity, 12 years that seemed like a lifetime of suffering. It wasn't just the physical and psychological violence that the land baron inflicted upon me, although that was terrible enough. The worst was seeing my children growing up in that unhealthy environment. They saw their mother constantly humiliated. They saw me crying in secret. They saw the bruises I tried to hide. They felt the tension in the air every time their father arrived. How to explain to a child why their mother gets tense when she hears the sound of a horse arriving? My children didn't go to school. The land baron didn't allow it. He said they didn't need to mix with other children, that I myself could teach them what they needed to know, even though I could barely write my own name. My children had no friends, didn't play with other children, didn't know a normal life. We were an island of pain in the middle of nowhere. We only had each other, me and my 3 children, trying to survive in that gilded cage. Marcus growing up rebellious, Olivia always scared, Aiden asking questions I didn't know how to answer. 12 years watching my babies turn into troubled children, unable to give them what every child deserves: peace, security, a real home. This was the greatest torture of all. In those years, life outside continued. My siblings got married one by one. The land baron always knew everything before everyone else. He had eyes and ears scattered throughout the entire town. "Ah, your brother Joseph got married last week," he would say casually during his visits. "His wife is already pregnant. Your first nephew is coming." How did he know these things? How did he know that my sister Francesca had found a job in the neighboring town? That my brother Anthony had bought a small piece of land? He controlled everything, knew everything, watched my family like a hawk watching a mouse. When I went to the market to do groceries, always accompanied from afar by one of his enforcers, I would hear the town gossip, Mrs. Gable always had sinister news to tell. A man was found dead on White Rock Road, she would whisper to the other women. They say he talked too much about certain things. Or, the Smith family disappeared overnight. They left everything and went away at dawn. No one knows why. I knew why. When someone defied the land baron, or knew too much, or asked too many questions, they simply disappeared. Some died in accidents, others fled in the middle of the night, others appeared beaten as an example. The land baron didn't need to kill everyone. It was enough to kill a few for the others to understand the message. That's how he maintained absolute control over the entire region. And I was part of that system of terror, living proof of his power. As the years passed, the land baron became more paranoid and more violent. He was pathologically jealous of me, thought I was looking at other men, that I was planning to escape. He controlled every minute of my life, every word I spoke. That's why he had placed his enforcers to watch me. "You're mine," he repeated constantly. "Mine forever." In town, I was seen as the land baron's official mistress, a strange position. I wasn't a wife, but I had his children. I wasn't respected. But I also wasn't mistreated by other men, because they knew I was his property. It was as if I were a public object that everyone knew but no one could touch. The land baron's legitimate children hated me, especially Catherine, the official wife. She knew everything, of course, but pretended not to. It was her way of maintaining her dignity. But I crossed paths with her twice on the street. She looked at me with pure hatred. It was on an October morning in 1974 that the news arrived that changed my life forever. Land Baron Jeremiah Miller had been found dead, floating in the creek that ran along his ranch's border. I was giving the children breakfast when Mrs. Jones, a distant neighbor, came knocking on my door, completely distressed. "Patricia, the land baron died. They found him in the creek." My first reaction was not to believe it. A man like that doesn't just die suddenly. The children heard and immediately started crying. The body had been found by some fishermen early in the morning, floating face up. The official version was that he had fallen from his horse and drowned, but everyone knew that the land baron could swim like a fish. Besides, there were no marks of a fall on his body, no head injury, only some strange marks on his neck that no one could properly explain. Gossip ran rampant. Some said he had been murdered by some enemy. Others said it was someone from his own family, tired of his abuses. There were those who said it was revenge from some father or husband of a woman he had abused, but the truth was never discovered. I was so relieved. I was free. God had heard my prayers. The man who had made my life hell was dead. On the other hand, I was scared. What would happen to me and the children? Where would we go? How would we survive? I began to think it was only a matter of time before his family came there and forced us out. I even remembered my husband, Theodore. If he was a husband and I had no right to anything, imagine being a mistress. The funeral was the next day. Half the town went. The children wanted to go, they insisted, but I wasn't that crazy. So, I agreed with them that we would go to the cemetery after everything settled down, and I kept my promise. That's where I saw James for the first time in 12 years. My goodness, how he had changed. He was no longer the 22-year-old young man I had known. He was a 34-year-old man, serious, with some graying hairs at his temples. He was accompanied by an elegant woman and 7 children, the family he had certainly built in Orlando. Our eyes met from afar. It was only a second, but it was as if time had stopped. I remembered everything I had gone through because of him, but even so, I had my doubts. Was it another one of the land baron's lies? But the doubt quickly passed. After all, it had been many years. He should have looked for me, but there he was, with a complete family from high society right before my eyes. A little more than a week after the funeral, James appeared at my door. Not just any lawyer, but he himself, who now managed the family's affairs as a lawyer. I was startled when I saw him. He was the last person I expected. I slammed the door in his face. Then he said, "I need to talk to you about the will." I already thought he was going to tell me I had to leave the house, that I had no right to anything. "The house is in your name," he said. Without understanding, I decided to open the door. He handed me the papers. My father left everything in order at the county clerk's office. I was confused. The land baron always said I lived there out of charity. I decided, then and there, to ask what had tormented me for years, and I didn't know if I would have another chance. "James," I managed to say, "I need to know the truth. Your father said you handed me over to him, that you got tired of me." It was then, before he could answer, that the children came. All 3 wanted to know who that man was. It was then that something strange came into my head, but I didn't say it. I thought, my God, they are siblings. James introduced himself as the land baron's lawyer. He didn't say he was his son. I asked to speak to him alone. The children went to the yard. We stayed there on the house's porch. He spoke first. "Your children are beautiful." His eyes filled with tears all of a sudden. He broke down, sat on a chair there, and put his head in his hands. "Patricia, my father discovered our meetings. He called me and said that if I didn't leave town immediately, he would kill you and your entire family." James looked up, and I saw tears of sincerity, his face red from crying, and he continued speaking. He confessed in front of me that he ordered those 2 families burned. He spoke laughing as if it were a joke. I listened with wide eyes. He said he would do worse to you all if I didn't disappear, that he would burn your house with your entire family inside, and then he would kill you slowly in front of me so I could see what happened when someone defied him. That man wasn't human, Patricia. He was the devil himself. James took a deep breath before continuing. I tried to forget, tried to build a life with my wife, but every sunrise reminded me of your golden hair, every blue sky of your eyes. The guilt of leaving you consumed me, but I believed it was the only way to protect you from my father's wrath. I never knew he had made you his mistress. I never imagined. I thought I had managed to protect you, that you were safe away from me. He shook his head desperately. I only found out the truth now, after he died. What do you mean? I asked, barely believing. Do you remember John, the enforcer who brought you groceries on Saturdays? I remembered him, the man who never looked me in the eye, who didn't even say good morning. I never even knew his name. He came to find me when he heard I had returned for the funeral. He said he couldn't bear to keep that secret anymore, that my father was a monster. James clenched his fists. He was the one who told me everything. How my father kept you prisoner, how he forced you, the children you had. John was always against these things his father did, always. But he had a family to support, he couldn't rebel. He told me that he suffered every time he went to deliver the groceries, that he knew what was happening but couldn't do anything. James looked at me with pain in his eyes. He asked for your forgiveness. He said that if he could have done something. So it wasn't just indifference I saw on John's face. It was shame. It was pain for not being able to help me. Patricia, if I had known, James whispered. What would you have done? Your father was capable of killing everyone, truly. 12 years of hatred for James melted away in that moment. He hadn't betrayed me. He had tried to protect me the best he could. After our conversation, he spoke again about the mansion where I lived, that it was in my name. The land baron always said I lived there out of charity, but he had left the house to me. It was the only property that the legitimate children couldn't contest, because everything was in order at the county clerk's office. Apparently, he had more consideration for you than he showed, James said. Consideration wasn't the right word, but at least I had a roof over my head for me and the children. I saw that even free, I was still tied to the past. Some loves are too big to fit into a single lifetime. We also talked about his family. James told me that his wife was a good woman, that they had grown close at the insistence of her father, who was an important judge in Orlando. An arranged marriage that turned into true love over time. She gave me 7 children who are my life, Patricia. She's a devoted mother, a loyal wife. He spoke of her with a tenderness that broke my heart. I love my family. I built a life there. I have responsibilities. When he left that day, I cried more than I had cried in 12 years. It wasn't just longing, it was rage. Rage for having lost the best years of my life because of the land baron's lies. Rage for discovering that James had never betrayed me, that he had tried to protect me. Rage for knowing that even dead, the land baron was still winning, because he had destroyed our love forever. I stayed alone in that mansion with my 3 children, trying to figure out how I would raise them now. Marcus, 11 years old, already rebellious about everything. Olivia, 9, my companion girl. She was with me every step of the way. Aiden, my youngest, 6, asking questions I didn't know how to answer. Free, but destroyed. Alive, but not knowing how to live. I realized I needed my family's support to rebuild my life. I took the children and went to my parents' house. 11 years without setting foot in that yard, because that first year I pretended everything was fine on the few occasions I visited them. My mother received me crying, hugged the children as if they were gifts from God, but I saw that she didn't quite understand the situation. To her, I had been the land baron's mistress, but after the land baron died, my father told her the whole truth, how he knew about the threats, how he had asked me to endure that life to save the whole family. My mother screamed, cried, cursed him with every name in the book. It took 2 weeks for my mother to understand. When she understood, she asked for forgiveness from me and my father. She knew he had chosen the lesser evil. We reconnected as a real family. My children finally met their aunts, uncles, cousins, discovered they had an entire family that loved them. Marcus, Olivia, and Aiden ran around the grandparents' yard like normal children, something they had never done. I enrolled all three in St. T's. Jude's academy in town, something the land baron had never allowed. But that's when I discovered the damage he had done to their education. You know, we never lacked material things in that house. Good food, nice clothes, expensive toys he brought from the big city. But he made a point of keeping us ignorant, uneducated, on purpose. "Why do these children need to study?" he would say when I asked to enroll them. "You can't read or write, and you're alive. They'll be fine, too." He called me stupid, ignorant, and said that if I knew how to read, I could teach the children. But it was a lie. He wanted to keep us dependent on him forever. I knew that when the children grew up, everything would be different. I believed they would confront him. Something would happen. The children were too intelligent. The land baron bought pencils and paper for them, and they drew everything, elaborate, detailed drawings that impressed anyone. They picked up newspapers and McCall's Patterns magazines that he sometimes brought. They could even copy the letters perfectly, but they couldn't read a single word. The lying land baron said he couldn't read or write to his children, said it wasn't important, all of them illiterate. The teacher was shocked. How is it possible for children this age not to know even the letters of their own names? I had to explain that they had lived isolated, that the master didn't allow education. It was a humiliation, but necessary. My children deserved to learn, deserved to have a chance in life, something my siblings and I never had. Changing the subject, the land baron's family's revenge came quickly. My mother, who had worked at the mansion for over 20 years as a laundress, was fired the day after the funeral. Catherine sent word that she no longer needed Eleanor's services. The butler came to tell her. He said that now that the land baron had died, he would cut some expenses. A lie. It was pure revenge. During the 12 years in the house, to not go completely insane, I had learned to crochet. The land baron sometimes brought magazines from Orlando. Some were McCall's Patterns magazines that had beautiful patterns for clothes and crochet stitches. Even being illiterate, I perfectly understood the charts from the drawings. I didn't need to read the little dots, the arrows, the symbols. All of that spoke to me. It was as if it were a universal language that my mind grasped just by looking. I spent hours and hours studying those drawings, trying to understand the stitches, making pieces, blankets, tablecloths, blouses, baby dresses. I learned complicated stitches just by following the charts, trying until I got it right. My fingers learned the language that my eyes couldn't decipher in letters. It was my refuge, my way of keeping my mind occupied, away from that hell. Every stitch I made was 1 minute less thinking about my misery. The house was full of beautiful pieces I had made over the years. Elaborate works, difficult stitches that I had mastered alone, just by looking at the drawings from the magazines from Orlando. "Daughter, these pieces are very beautiful," my mother said one day, touching a blanket I had made. "Why don't we sell them?" I taught her to crochet, but when I showed her the patterns from the McCall's Patterns magazines that I had a collection of, she was lost. "Daughter, this is Greek to me," she said, looking at all those symbols. "How do you manage to understand this confusion?" It was true, interpreting those patterns was very difficult. So I started teaching her the traditional way, showing her with my hands, making her repeat the movements, teaching stitch by stitch with great patience. I forgot the magazine patterns and went back to the basics: chain stitch, single crochet, double crochet. She quickly got the hang of it. So, in 2 weeks, she was already making beautiful pieces. We started taking our pieces to the stores in town. At first, some owners turned their faces away when they saw me. Everyone knew who I was, what I had been. But when they saw the quality of the work, they couldn't resist. "This blanket is very well made," the owner of the fabric store admitted, even though she didn't like talking to me. "How much are you asking?" The pieces were so elaborate, so different from the common crochet that other women made, that they quickly began to sell out. Works with beautiful flowers that I made, stitches that no one else in town knew how to do, elaborate designs copied from the magazines from Orlando. Even with the prejudice, money is money, and well-made work always finds its place. In a few months, we already had a good clientele that placed orders. Women asked for everything: complete sets of rugs for the kitchen and bathroom, table runners, dishcloths with elaborate crochet edgings, pot holders, napkin holders, centerpieces, gas tank covers, sofa cushions, all matching, all in the same theme and colors. I was so happy to be able to help my family for real, for the first time in my life. After so many years of being a burden, of being a problem, I was finally contributing something useful. My mother was even earning more than when she struggled to wash clothes in the creek. Her back, which used to ache so much from carrying heavy bundles and scrubbing in the tub, began to improve. Now she sat comfortably in a chair, crocheting, talking to me, smiling. My sister Francesca also wanted to learn. She saw us making money at home and became interested. I taught her too, and she caught on quickly, just like my mother, fast and precise. Soon, there were 3 women working together, producing beautiful pieces. "Daughter, you taught me a real profession," my mother would always say, her eyes full of tears of gratitude. I caught my father several times standing, watching us, emotional. They always thanked me, every day, several times a day, as if I had performed a miracle in their lives. It was a dignified, creative profession that respected their age, and most importantly, it was ours. No one could fire us. No one could humiliate us. We were owners of our own business. It was in April 1976 that the news arrived that changed everything again. James's wife had died giving birth to their 8th child. Mother and baby died together in a tragedy that moved the entire region. 3 months later, James returned to the ranch with his 7 orphaned children. His decision to return to the countryside caused an uproar in town. Everyone wanted to know what had motivated the move. The truth was that raising 7 children alone in Orlando was proving impossible for him. The eldest was 12 years old, the same age as my Marcus. But what I learned later was that his return to the countryside also had another, more urgent reason. As the eldest son, James was responsible for administering the family's properties in his father's absence, and things were very bad at the ranch. With the land baron's death, the enemies he had made over decades began to seek revenge. Families that had been expelled from the lands, people who had suffered at his hands, workers who harbored resentment, everyone who had feared the land baron now felt free to attack. They began to invade the lands, taking possession of parts of the ranch, threatening the workers who were still loyal to the family. Some even burned barns, stole cattle, destroyed crops. It was a collective revenge against everything the land baron represented. Catherine was desperate. A 60-year-old widow could not control the situation. The land baron's old enforcers had fled or changed sides. The family was being threatened. Some neighbors talked about expelling the Millers from the region. Worse still, one of James's brothers, the 2nd eldest son, had been arrested right there in the region for debts and problems with some neighboring ranchers. The family urgently needed a lawyer to resolve the legal issues. I learned all this through my father, who still worked for the Miller family even after the land baron's death. Thank goodness he wasn't fired like my mother. He would come home telling the gossip, how Catherine was desperate, sending messages for James to return, how bad the situation was on the ranch. James came because he was the only son with enough education to face those problems. He needed to defend the lands in court, negotiate with the invaders, protect his mother and younger siblings from threats. It was a matter of survival. He wanted to clear the Miller family's honor. After almost a month of being in the region, he sought me out. It was on a Thursday afternoon. I was cleaning the bathroom when I heard the sound of an engine on the road. The children were at school. I was alone. I was startled when I saw a car on the road. You know, there was no gate at my house. It was an open space, and right in front was the road. A car was a rare sight there in the region. Even the land baron, considered the most important man, didn't have a car or know how to drive. He only rode a horse. When I saw that it was James getting out of the car, my heart pounded. I stood there with a rag in my hand, all wet from cleaning, not knowing what to do. It had been over 2 years since we had last spoken, and now he was there at my door. My goodness, how that man moved me. My heart almost leaped out of my chest when I saw him. "Patricia," he said, taking off his hat, "can I talk to you?" I was still in shock. Seeing him there in a car, dressed like a man from the big city, reminded me how much our social difference had grown. He was the new master of the region. I was the former mistress of his father. Still in shock, I let the man in. He looked around. I understood. He was looking for the children. "The children aren't here," I managed to say nervously. Then he smiled and nodded. I let him in, offered him coffee. We stayed there in the kitchen, him sitting in a chair, me standing leaning against the stove, not knowing what to expect. The silence hung heavy in the air for what seemed like an eternity. "James," I began, trying to break the ice, "I heard about your wife and the baby." I saw his eyes filling with tears immediately. "It was very difficult," he managed to say. His voice choked. I didn't think twice. I moved away from the stove and went to hug him. A hug of a friend, of someone who understood suffering. "It's good that you're back," I said, holding his shoulders. "I'm glad to see you around these parts." He let himself be comforted there. The problem was that it was a complicated situation, and I was getting tempted, smelling his hair, stroking his face against my chest. I realized I was being foolish and quickly moved away, sitting in the chair in front of him. And then I changed the subject. "You said you came to talk to me. What would it be about?" He just sat there looking at me for a long time, as if gathering courage to say something important. "Patricia," he began in a low voice, "I never stopped thinking about you all these years. I felt my heart pound. Throughout my entire marriage, my whole life in Orlando, you were always here." He hit his chest. "I need to know if you still feel anything for me." I didn't know what to answer. Of course I did. I had never stopped feeling. But saying that was dangerous. "James, just answer me," he insisted. "Do you still think of me?" "Every day," I admitted, unable to lie. That's when he got up from the chair and came close to me. He held my face with both hands, looking into my eyes as he did when we were young. "I love you, Patricia. I always have. Even married, even far away, it was always you." And he kissed me. What a kiss that was. 14 years of longing, of suffering, of stored love, all pouring out in that moment. I gave myself over like a fool, kissing him back with all the strength I had in my body. His hands began to move over my dress slowly, pressing me, caressing me. I felt that fire rising that I hadn't felt in so long. I was desperate to surrender, to feel again what it was like to be loved, to be desired by someone I also wanted. But suddenly, I looked at the clock on the kitchen wall. "James, stop," I said, pulling away from him. "It's time to pick up the children from school." He stood there, panting with messy hair, looking at me as if I were crazy. "I need to leave now," I explained, trying to straighten my dress and hair. "Tomorrow," I said, still trying to catch my breath. "If you want, come back tomorrow, a little earlier. They'll be at school." He got the message, picked up his hat, gave me another quick kiss, and left. I stayed there in the kitchen, leaning against the table, my heart pounding like a drum and my whole body trembling. I wondered, could it be, my God? Will we finally be together now? Well, of course, I didn't sleep that night. I kept tossing and turning in bed, barely believing what was going to happen the next day. It had been 14 years since I had been with a man by my own will, out of desire, out of love. With the land baron, it had been only violence, obligation, suffering. I got up early, finished cleaning the house quickly, took a bath, perfumed myself with the cologne I had saved for special moments. I put on my prettiest dress, a light pink one with blue floral prints that enhanced my eyes. I looked in the mirror and saw a 29-year-old woman, still beautiful, still desirable. The years of suffering had marked me but had not completely destroyed me. Before I knew it, I was already at the living room window, waiting for him to arrive. James arrived at the agreed time. I opened the door before he even knocked, and we looked at each other for a second that seemed eternal. "I thought you might have changed your mind," he said. "But I didn't," I replied. He came in, and this time there was no small talk, no coffee, nothing. We knew why he had come. James kissed me right there in the living room, with a hunger of 14 years. His hands trembled as they touched my face, my neck, as if he couldn't believe what was really happening. "Patricia," he whispered in my ear, "I've dreamed of this so many times." I couldn't say anything, I just felt. I felt his hands undressing me slowly, carefully, with tenderness. What a difference from the land baron, who treated me like an object. James touched me as if I were made of crystal, as if I were precious. We went to the bedroom slowly, kissing along the way. When we got to the bed, we did what you already know. Then we lay there, embracing, without saying anything, just feeling each other's hearts beating. "It was worth the wait," he said, kissing my hair. "It was," I agreed, even knowing that it would complicate everything in my life. But at that moment, I didn't want to think about complications. I just wanted to stay there, being loved the way I had always dreamed of being loved. Time flew by. When I looked at the clock, there was half an hour left until I had to pick up the children from school. "You need to go," I said, almost without wanting to. "Already?" he complained, holding me tighter. "The children can't know yet." He understood. He dressed, kissed me one more time, and promised to return on Monday, as the children would be with me all day Saturday and Sunday. And that's how, my daughter, my downfall began. We started meeting every day we could. James always appeared at the same time, when the children were at school. He would arrive by car, and we would surrender to each other like two mad lovers. I lived in that sweet anxiety of someone in love. I would wake up early, clean the house quickly, take a bath, perfume myself, choose a pretty outfit, all to be ready to receive him. It was as if the whole week only existed for those 2 hours in the afternoon. I started to change, to be happier, more vain, more of a woman. I would hum while doing housework and my crocheting. I would smile for no reason. I had more patience with the children. I was living a dream after 14 years of nightmares. My mother was the first to notice that I had changed. A woman doesn't fool a woman, especially a mother doesn't fool her daughter. She saw that I was more dressed up, more perfumed, happier. She saw that I was buying new clothes, taking better care of my hair, that I had even bought lipstick in town. One day she showed up at the house without warning, just when James was there. Thank goodness it was time for him to leave. She came in through the front door while he left through the back. They almost didn't see each other. "Daughter, you're different," she said, looking me up and down. "Different how, Mom?" "More of a woman, more vain. That's a sign of a man in your life." I tried to pretend, said I was fine, that I was earning money with crochet and could afford some luxuries. But a mother knows her daughter like the back of her hand. The following week she came back, and the week after that too. She started watching my movements, asking questions, dropping hints, until one day she couldn't take it anymore and said everything she was thinking. "Patricia," she said, serious as a judge, "are you seeing a man?" It was no use denying it. She already knew. "I am," I admitted. "Who is it? Is it James, daughter, the land baron's son?" My mother turned white, then red, then purple with anger. She pulled my ears so hard I almost fell out of the chair. "Have you gone completely crazy, girl?" "Mom, we love each other." "Love? Nothing of the sort. You're a mistress again. It's not like that." "And answer me one thing." She crossed her arms. "Has he proposed marriage?" I stayed silent. "Has he talked about marrying you?" I continued to be silent because I had nothing to say. "Has he talked about publicly acknowledging you, about introducing you as his girlfriend, about taking you to meet his family, his children? Do his children know?" Each question was a slap in the face with reality. "He's rich, he's unencumbered, he's a widower. What's stopping him from acknowledging you if his intentions are serious?" That's when it clicked. In 2 months of relationship, James had never talked about marriage, never talked about acknowledging anything. He just enjoyed the situation and left, just like his father did, only without the violence. "Daughter," my mother continued, You're serving as his relief. He comes here and satisfies his needs and goes back to his respectable life on the ranch. Mom, it's not like that. Yes, it is. He has a name to protect, a social position to maintain. Do you think he's going to marry his own father's ex-mistress, a woman who is marked, with 3 illegitimate children? Each word hurt more than a punch to the stomach. Soon you'll get pregnant again, and then what? Is he going to claim that child? If you're not already pregnant, you'll raise another bastard alone. I realized my mother was right. James had never talked about the future, never talked about marriage, never talked about getting me out of that situation. He just came, used my body, and went back to his life as if I didn't exist. It was the same situation as before, only now by my own choice. That night, alone in the bed that still smelled of James, I cried until I had no more tears. I cried for the fool I was, for the illusion I had created, for the reality I didn't want to see. The next day, when James arrived for our meeting, I was determined to end it once and for all, to confront him. But when James arrived, I realized he was different, more tense, more worried. He didn't even kiss me properly when he came in. My mother found out, he said without mincing words. She knows I'm coming here. I felt my stomach drop. Catherine finding out meant certain disaster, but I also thought that was the right thing to happen. How did she find out? Someone saw me coming into your house, probably Mrs. Gable, the town's gossip. She came to my house, all solicitous, telling me she had seen me leaving here several times. James said his mother had thrown a huge fit. She screamed, cried, threatened, dramatized like a soap opera actress. She said he was dishonoring his dead wife's memory, that he was sullying the family name, that I was a plague that only brought misfortune to the Millers. She said she'll never accept you, he said, running his hand through his hair nervously. That if I continue with this, either I leave the ranch or she'll end your life. I tried to hide it, but fear was already setting in. I knew the power of that family. I knew what they were capable of. James said he had tried to explain our story to his mother. He told her that we were sweethearts before the land baron, that we truly loved each other, and that his father had separated us by force, that I had been a victim, not guilty. It didn't do a damn bit of good. He sighed. She said that no matter how it started, what matters is that you were my father's mistress for 12 years. For her, that marks you forever as a fallen woman. Besides his mother, James was facing another serious problem, his children. The children were constantly crying for their dead mother, idealizing Abigail as if she were a saint. They thought no woman could take her place. They only talk about Abigail all the time, James complained. Every single day they ask when Mommy is coming back from heaven. They want to visit her grave. They keep her clothes like sacred relics. The oldest even set up an altar in his room with a picture of his mother and everything. Even so, James insisted that he wanted to introduce me to his children. He said that if they got to know me properly, they would like me, they would accept our relationship. Away from my mother, he emphasized, without any pressure, just for them to get to know you as a normal person. We agreed to meet at the town park on a Saturday afternoon. I told my mother and asked her to stay with my children. We would take one step at a time. James brought his 7 children. His children were very different from mine. Educated, well-behaved, spoke properly, without a rural accent. They had that poise of rich people, expensive clothes, polished shoes, the girls' hair and beautiful hairstyles done by the nanny. Nathan Jr., the oldest, 14, looked at me with a frown from the beginning. He already showed arrogance, that way of looking as if he were superior. Olivia, the 12-year-old girl, was more polite. She greeted me properly. The 8-year-old twins were shy, and the younger boys were more outgoing. But Nathan Jr. didn't speak to me, not even when I offered him candy. He stayed in the corner, studying me with those harsh eyes that reminded me of his grandfather, the land baron. When James introduced me as a family friend, I noticed the way they looked at me, not with malice, but with that polite curiosity of rich children seeing a simple person. I was wearing my prettiest dress, but even so, I looked like a maid next to them. "The children liked you," James said at the end. smiling. Especially the little ones. They need a woman's affection. That older boy didn't like me at all, I commented, looking at Nathan Jr., who was separated from the others. He's difficult, James admitted somewhat awkwardly. Ever since his mother died, he's been rebellious about everything and everyone. He doesn't accept any changes. I understood him. My oldest son was also a bit rebellious. What I didn't know was that that kid was much more dangerous than he seemed. Catherine had started a war campaign against me, poisoning her grandchildren's minds. She told horrible stories about me, said I was a fallen woman who wanted to take advantage of their family, that I had seduced their grandfather, and now wanted to seduce their father to steal their inheritance. That tramp wants to destroy our family, she repeated to the children every day. She's the one who killed your grandfather with voodoo. She's the one who destroyed our home, and now she wants to do the same thing to your father. The wicked old woman invented every story about me. It was pitiful. She told her grandchildren that I was a witch, that I did voodoo to trap men, that I had poisoned the land baron to get his lands. Pure lies. But children believe what adults say, especially when it comes from the grandmother they respected. Who told me all this was James himself. He would come home and say, "Patricia, you won't believe the nonsense my mother invented today about you. Look, I'm going to tell you something that still makes me laugh today. It was so absurd. Once, Catherine told her grandchildren that I was a mermaid. That's right, you heard me, a mermaid. She said I had enchanted the land baron with my mermaid song and my hypnotizing blue eyes. That's why he had become obsessed with me. Imagine that." James would laugh as he told it. "She said you came out of the creek at dawn to seduce my father with supernatural powers." James and I almost died laughing when he told these things. A mermaid? A woman who could barely swim properly became a mermaid in that crazy old woman's head. But for the children, that was absolute truth, and the worst part was, they really believed it. They were afraid of me, thinking I would enchant their father too. Nathan Jr., being older and the one who influenced his siblings the most, absorbed all that venom from his grandmother like a sponge absorbs dirty water, and decided to take action to protect his family from the danger I represented. It was on a Tuesday night. I was finishing dinner with the children when there was a loud knock on the door, like the police doing a search. When I opened it, Nathan Jr. was standing there with 3 other boys his age, all sons of rich ranchers in the region. One of them I recognized as the grandson of the bank owner. "Patricia," the boy asked with a firm, cold voice like a grown man doing business, "what do you want here at this hour?" "I came to deliver a message from my grandmother. Stop messing with my father, or we'll set fire to this rotten house with you all inside." I felt my blood run cold and my legs tremble. It was his grandfather speaking through the mouth of that 14-year-old boy. The same threat, the same coldness, the same malice running in his veins. "Does your father know you're here making threats?" "My father knows nothing, but Grandma knows, and she sent us. She said that if you don't leave him alone, we'll do to you what Grandpa used to do to those who disrespected the Miller family." The other 3 boys stood behind them, all holding thick sticks, all with the faces of rabid dogs ready to attack. Rich, well-dressed boys who should have been studying, but there they were, ready to commit a crime like adult criminals. "You have 3 days to disappear from my father's life," Nathan Jr. added, stepping forward menacingly. 3 days to take your illegitimate children and get far away from here. After that, we'll come back, and it won't just be to talk." "And if I don't go?" The boy smiled just like his grandfather used to smile when making death threats. "Then you'll find out that fire burns just like when Grandpa ordered houses burned with people inside. And this tramp here will turn into charcoal along with the bastards she bore." That's when Marcus appeared at the door. My 13-year-old boy, a year younger than Nathan Jr., had heard everything from the kitchen. He came out like a raging bull with that bad temper he inherited. I don't know from where. I know exactly from where. "Say that again, you son of a bee," Marcus cried, stepping out into the yard. "I said your mother is a tramp." Nathan Jr. couldn't even finish speaking. Marcus lunged at him and delivered a precise punch to the rich boy's face. Blood spurted from Nathan Jr. His nose, and he was dizzy for a few seconds. "No one talks about my mother, you scoundrel," my son yelled. But the other 3 rich boys, along with Nathan Jr., jumped on Marcus, 4 against 1, all with thick sticks in their hands. My son was strong, more hot-headed than anything, but there was no way he could win against 4. He took blows from all sides, punches to the face, beatings on the back, kicks to the stomach. When I tried to intervene to defend my boy, I took a strong punch to the head that knocked me to the ground. "Mom!" Olivia cried from the doorway. Marcus was on the ground, all bruised, bleeding from his mouth and nose. Nathan Jr. spat on him and said, "A tramp's child will always be like his mother, trash." They left laughing and making noise, leaving terror in my house. Marcus was hurt. My head was throbbing. Olivia was crying desperately. Aiden didn't know what to do. "Is it really happening, Mom? Are we going to burn to death like those families?" Olivia asked, her eyes red from crying. "No, daughter, we're not." I lied, wiping the blood from Marcus's face. That night, I couldn't sleep for a minute. I kept getting up to look out the windows, listening for any strange noise, imagining if they weren't pouring kerosene around the house to set it on fire with us inside. I understood that Catherine had created a young version of the land baron. Nathan Jr. was only 14, but he already had his grandfather's evil running in his rotten veins. He already knew how to use fear as a weapon, already knew how to make death threats, already thought about burning people alive to solve family problems. The rotten apple hadn't fallen far from the tree, and I was once again in the sights of a miller determined to destroy me to protect the power and honor of the damned family. The next morning, after that night of terror, I sat all 3 of them at the kitchen table. Marcus's face still swollen from the beating, Olivia's eyes red from crying so much, and my little Aiden trying to understand all that confusion. "Mom," Marcus began, looking directly into my eyes. "That kid said you were his grandfather's mistress. Is it true? Who is his grandfather?" My heart shattered. It was the question I most dreaded in life. How to explain such an absurd situation to children? I took a deep breath and decided to tell them what they could understand. "It's true, my son," I began, my voice trembling. "Do you remember that we always lived just the 4 of us here in this house, and that the land baron used to come here 3 times a week?" The children nodded. They remembered the tension, the fear I felt when I heard the horse arriving. "Your father was that boy's grandfather. He didn't live here because he had his family, his wife, other children on the ranch. You were a secret." Olivia put her hand over her mouth, startled. Marcus's eyes widened. Aiden was confused. "But why didn't you send him away, Mom?" Marcus asked. "Because he was a very powerful man, my son. He controlled everything in the region. If I disobeyed, he would harm our entire family, your grandparents, your aunts and uncles, your cousins. I endured it to protect everyone." "Is that why you always got nervous when he arrived, Mom?" Olivia asked. "That's right, daughter. He was mean. He yelled at me. He hit me. He didn't let you study. Remember that you only went to school after he died?" They remembered, yes, they remembered living isolated in that same house, unable to go out, having no friends. "And now, Mom, why did those boys come here to threaten us?" Olivia asked. "Because I'm dating James, who is the land baron's son, your brother by your father's side. His family doesn't like me. They think I'm no good and are threatening to harm you because of my dating him." After much discussion about me dating him in secret, Aiden, my little one, said terrified, "Are they really going to set our house on fire, Mom? I don't want to die burned." He started to cry. That's when I promised to break up with James to protect my children, even knowing that I was sacrificing my happiness. That love wasn't for me. I needed to accept it. In the afternoon of that same day, around 2 o'clock, I heard the sound of a car engine arriving. My heart pounded because James always came at the time the children were at school, only this time they were all at home. I wasn't going to send Marcus to school with his face all swollen and bruised. It would cause too much talk in the whole town. I ran to the window and saw James getting out of the car, all dressed up as always, with that starched white shirt and his hat on his head. He was smiling, probably thinking he was going to find me alone as usual. When he knocked on the door and I opened it, his expression changed completely. He saw the 3 children there in the living room, all looking at me expectantly. Olivia was sitting on the sofa, crocheting, which I had taught her. Aiden was playing with his wooden figurines on the floor, and Marcus was leaning against the wall with his face bruised from the beating. "Good afternoon," James said somewhat awkwardly, taking off his hat. "What happened to the boy?" I felt my stomach churn. James was seeing the damage his own son had done, without knowing it was his family's fault. "Your son did this," Marcus said directly, without mincing words. "Your son came here last night with 3 boys and beat me up. He threatened to burn us alive here in the house." James turned white as a sheet. "What? How so? My son came here?" "That's right. You heard me," my son continued angrily. "He said that if my mother doesn't stop dating you, they'll set our house on fire with us inside." "Marcus," I tried to interrupt, but the boy was enraged. "No, Mom, he needs to know." The boy turned to James with hatred in his eyes. "Your son said my mother is a tramp, that we are bastards, that we will turn into charcoal if we don't disappear from here." James staggered and had to lean against the doorframe, the color completely drained from his face. "My God, my son did this?" "Yes, he did. And he even spit on me when I was on the ground," Marcus yelled, tears of anger streaming down his face. "He called us trash, just like our mother." Olivia started crying. Aiden bravely decided to speak too. "He said it was your mother who sent the message." James stood there, shaking his head as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. "It's not possible, my son. I never imagined." "It is possible," I said firmly. "Your son is already just like his grandfather. He knows how to make death threats. He knows how to hit. He knows how to use fear to get what he wants." "My mother sent him to do this?" James asked, his voice broken. That's when Marcus confirmed everything, saying that Nathan Jr. had made it clear that he was following his grandmother's orders. The boy repeated exactly the words the kid had used about doing what the grandpa used to do to those who disrespected the Miller family. James broke down, literally broke down. He sat in the chair and put his head in his hands, crying like a child. He was discovering that his own mother had turned his son into a young version of the land baron. The wicked old woman had poisoned her grandson's mind against me, teaching him the same tactics of terror that her husband used. I sent the children to the yard so I could talk to him without an audience. When we were alone, James cried non-stop, apologizing, saying he would never have imagined his son was capable of that. I told him how traumatized my children had been since the previous night, how they hadn't been able to sleep properly, how Aiden had wet the bed out of sheer fear. I explained that I had no choice, that it was my children's lives or our love, and that any mother worth her salt knew what the right choice was. James tried to promise that he would resolve the situation, that he would talk to his mother, that he would put his son in line, but I knew it was too late. The seed of evil had already been planted in that boy's head. I told him to leave and never come back, that it was better for everyone, that I had to protect my children from the evil that ran in the veins of that cursed family. James left there destroyed, knowing he was losing the love of his life for the second time. And I stayed there, also destroyed, but with a clear conscience that I had made the right choice as a mother. That night, I gathered my 3 children and promised again that I would never see James again, that they were more important than any man. Marcus hugged me tightly and said I had done the right thing. Olivia managed to smile for the first time since the threat, and Aiden slept peacefully, knowing that his mother would protect them. It was proof that I had made the right decision, even though my heart was broken. The next day, I went to my mother's house to tell her what had happened. When I explained about the boy's visit and how Nathan Jr. had threatened to burn us all, my mother was relieved to know that I had broken up with James, but she was also sad, shaking her head with pity. "What a sadness, daughter," she said, sighing deeply. "A boy so young already choosing the path of evil, just like his grandfather. The Miller family carries a curse in their blood." The days that followed were very difficult, worse even than when I was trapped in the land baron's house, because now I had tasted freedom and true love, and I had lost both at once. Wherever I went in town, I was pointed at. Gossip ran rampant, each more invented than the last. Mrs. Gable, the town's biggest gossip, along with her friends, spread rumors that I had tried to seduce James to steal the family inheritance, that I hadn't even waited for the deceased wife's body to cool. Other women whispered that I was indeed a witch, that I had enchanted both father and son with voodoo. The difference was that before, when I was the land baron's mistress, no one dared to openly disrespect me. Everyone was afraid of his power, so they treated me with a forced, feigned politeness. But they treated me. Now I was unprotected, just a single woman with 3 illegitimate children. At the bakery, the owner served me poorly, throwing bread on the counter with a sour face. At the pharmacy, the owner made a point of making me wait while he attended to other customers first. My turn never came. Worse still, they stopped buying our crochets. The stores that used to compete for our pieces now refused anything that came from me or my mother. It's not selling anymore. The owner of the fabric store lied blatantly, pushing back the beautiful blanket I had brought. People don't want this type of work anymore. It was a pure lie. Our crochets were the most beautiful in the region. Everyone knew it. But now I was a marked woman, and anyone who bought from me ran the risk of being viewed poorly by the Miller family. In a small town, no one wanted to make a powerful enemy for the sake of a crochet blanket. My mother and my sister Francesca were also affected by the boycott. Even though it was their work, since they had learned from me, they were considered accomplices. The livelihood we had built with so much pride disappeared overnight. "Daughter, I don't know how we're going to survive," my mother said, looking at the basket full of finished pieces that we couldn't sell. All those months of work just sitting there, useless. The worst part of all was seeing my children suffering at school. The other children had heard their parents gossip and started picking on mine. They called them bastards, children of a tramp, repeating the cruelties they heard at home. Marcus came home from school with bruised fists from fighting so much, defending our family's honor. Olivia came home crying, telling me that the girls didn't want to play with her. Aiden, my little one, suffered the most because he didn't understand why everyone was being cruel to him. "Mom, I don't want to go to school anymore," Olivia said one afternoon, her eyes red from crying. "The teachers pretend not to see when the other girls call me names. Everyone looks at me like I'm an animal." Marcus also wanted to stop going to school. He was tired of fighting every day, tired of hearing insults about me, tired of having to defend our family alone. Even Aiden, who was the most docile, started inventing stomach aches so he wouldn't have to leave the house. It was one of the most painful times of my life, seeing my children being punished for sins that weren't theirs and not even mine, paying the price for a situation I hadn't chosen to live. They were being marked forever, just as I had been marked. Catherine hated me with all the forces of her rotten heart. The pressure was constant. She manipulated her grandchildren against me, spread gossip throughout the town. That's when I made the most difficult decision of my life. I decided to sell the house and leave that cursed town. I couldn't bear to live in that hell anymore. I put the house up for sale, but I discovered that even that would be a torment. No one wanted to buy the house. It was beautiful, well located, but it was marked. It was the house of the land baron's ex-mistress, the house of the cursed woman. Whoever bought it would inherit my bad reputation along with the property. A merchant from a neighboring town appeared interested, but the offer he made was an insult. He wanted to pay less than half of what the house was worth. I couldn't accept it. It was the only valuable thing we had. If I sold it for that pittance, we would leave town with nothing. I knew that houses were expensive, and we wouldn't be able to start over anywhere else. It was on a Thursday afternoon when a frightened boy came to my door, looking around as if he was doing something wrong. He was the son of the town shoemaker, a boy about 10 years old. "Patricia," he said softly, "there's a man who wants to talk to you." He told me to deliver the message. The boy looked around again and whispered, "He told you to meet him in the clearing in the woods behind the old church tomorrow at 2 o'clock in the afternoon." My heart pounded immediately. The clearing in the woods behind the old church. That's where James and I used to meet when we were young, over 15 years ago. Only he knew that place. Only he could have sent that specific message. It was our secret, our refuge, when we were hidden lovers. "Who sent this message?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. "A young man in nice clothes, in a car. He said you would know who he was." The boy got nervous. He gave me a dime to bring the message and another dime not to tell anyone. After the boy ran off, I stood there wondering whether I should go or not. It had been 2 months since I had seen James, 2 months since I had promised my children not to meet him again. But that place, only James knew it. It was impossible for it to be a trap. It was impossible for it to be someone else. I thought about not going. I thought about pretending I had never received any message. But curiosity was stronger. I wanted to know what he had to say that he couldn't say at my house, and that was so important that he had chosen our most intimate place to meet me. I went, but with my heart full of fear and longing. Arriving there, I saw James leaning against the same tree where we used to embrace when we were young. When he saw me, he came towards me and tried to kiss me on the mouth, but I pulled back. "What do you want, James?" I asked. He took a deep breath and released the proposal. He had found out that I wanted to leave town, that I had put the house up for sale. He wanted to buy my house at a fair price. I would take the money and go to another town to start a new life, and from time to time he would appear there for us to meet, to be together. I looked at that man as if I were seeing the devil himself. It took me a few seconds to process what he was proposing. He wanted me to hide in a distant town to be his private mistress, to support myself in a small house, to show up whenever he felt like it, to do whatever he wanted with me, and then return to his respectable life. The blood rushed to my head like fire. The anger I felt was so great that my hands began to tremble. He was just like his father. The only difference was that the land baron forced me by force. James wanted me to accept by my own will. I said he was weak and cowardly, that his mother controlled him like a child, that he had let that 14-year-old boy threaten me and my children and did nothing, that he didn't have the courage to acknowledge me, that he was ashamed of me. I said my mother was right from the beginning, that he would use me and then go back to his life. That the land baron at least admitted he was a demon, he didn't pretend he loved me like James did. Tears of anger streamed down my face. I said I wasn't an object for him to hide, that I was a woman with dignity, that I deserved to be loved openly, not in the shadows like a shame. I grabbed a handful of dry leaves from the ground and threw them away, as if I were throwing away our entire history. I said I never wanted to see him in front of me again, that he had already shown what kind of man he was. James tried to hold me, to say something. I heard him say he didn't want to offend me but protect me, but I was already leaving that clearing. I didn't look back even once, even hearing him calling me. I cried all the way home. My heart was only sadness. I had finally seen James for what he truly was, a man too weak to truly love me, too cowardly to defend me from his family. When I got home, I washed my face and promised myself that I would never again let any man humiliate me. James was no good, never was. I had been foolish to believe him twice in my life, but now I was free from that illusion forever. That day I understood that some men are born to be cowards. James was one of them. At 36, he still let his mother dictate his life. He didn't have the courage to face his family, to defend the one he claimed to love. His proposal showed me exactly who he was, a man who wanted to have me hidden, use me whenever he felt like it, and then pretend I didn't exist, just like his father, only more hypocritical. At least the land baron didn't feign feelings. Well, now I'm going to tell you something that will shock you more than anything you've heard from me so far. Around this time, about 2 weeks after I had that horrible conversation with James, my mother and father showed up at my door with 2 strange men in sophisticated suits. They brought my parents by car. I was very scared at the time because I was preparing the children to take them to school, and my father never came to my house. He must have gone once in his life after the land baron died, just out of curiosity to see my mansion. I invited them in, offered coffee. My mother and father looked like they had seen a ghost, trembling like leaves. The 2 men in suits introduced themselves as lawyers, but didn't explain exactly what they wanted, as my father asked to talk to me and the children before the 2 spoke about why they had come. It was then that my father and mother began to tell me a chilling story, a story that changed everything I thought about my life, about who I was, about where I came from. My father looked at me with tears in his eyes and dropped the bomb. I was not their biological daughter. I felt a chill run down my spine. The children stopped moving. Olivia dropped her crochet needle. Everyone felt that something very serious was happening. My mother started crying like a child. My father ran his hand through his hair nervously before continuing to tell the story. He said that my real father was his cousin, a German named William, who had come to work on the Davidson family's rich citrus groves in the region. My world began to fall apart. 30 years, thinking I knew who I was, and now I discovered that it was all a lie. William was different from the other workers. He knew how to read and write, spoke 2 languages, German and English, and had fallen in love with the daughter of his employers, a rich, high-society young lady named Helena. Marcus came closer to me, seeing that I was turning pale. My father said that they loved each other in secret for 2 years, but when Helena got pregnant with me, the family found out and sent her to a distant boarding school to have the child and give it up for adoption. They wanted to hide that story at all costs. I listened to all of it. That story kept getting worse and worse. Helena and William tried to flee together when she was 6 months pregnant. He went after his beloved. They wanted to get married and raise me far from everything, but they were caught on the road by her family's enforcers. My father clenched his fists when he told what happened next. They killed William in front of her. They shot him in the chest with her, pregnant, watching everything. I felt the blood drain from my face. Olivia started crying softly. I was already crying a lot too. The 2 men, the attorneys, were there outside our house, very quiet. My mother, Eleanor, continued telling. Helena fainted from despair. She almost lost me at that moment. They took her back to the boarding school, more dead than alive, and I never knew what they did with my real father's body. But Helena didn't stay there at the boarding school. She ran away again. This time, she was 8 months pregnant, almost giving birth. She didn't want to give the child up for adoption and went to look for William's family to tell them what had happened. When Helena arrived at the house of William's parents, Grace and Henry, they were startled. They thought their son and she were living happily far away in a distant city. William had said goodbye to his parents almost 3 months earlier, saying he was going to rescue his beloved and that they would run away together to start a new life. The old couple had been waiting for a letter, news, some sign that everything was fine. Seeing Helena alone, pregnant, desperate, crying like crazy at their doorstep was a terrible shock. When she managed to say that William had been dead for 2 months, that they had shot him in front of her, my grandparents broke down from so much sadness. They almost died from crying so much. They had had their son murdered, and they didn't even know it. 2 months praying for him to be well, imagining he was happy in a distant land, building a family with his beloved woman, and in reality, his body was left somewhere without a Christian burial, without prayer, without a farewell. Helena told everything between sobs, how they had been discovered trying to escape. My real father's mother took pity on her and let her stay. That's where I was born, on a rainy dawn, with Helena screaming in pain and longing for William. We both almost died in childbirth. By this point, I was in tears. Who wouldn't be? And looking around, I saw that my children were also crying with me. It was impossible not to be moved by so many revelations. Marcus, who was always tougher, had red eyes, and that showed me that beneath that tough exterior, he did have a soft heart. Olivia and Aiden cried too much, you know. Discovering that your entire life was built on lies isn't easy for anyone. I felt lost, as if I had woken up in a strange house. Please, be patient with me as I tell all this, because it's one of the most difficult moments of my life, reliving these memories. After I was born, Helena spent 3 days looking at me, crying non-stop. She said I had my father's eyes, that I was just like him. Then I asked the question that was burning in my throat. Where was she now? My father and mother looked at each other as if they had saved the worst for last. My mother whispered the answer that changed my life forever. My real mother was alive. The world stopped spinning at that moment. My German grandmother was named Grace Weber, younger sister of my adoptive grandmother, who was my father Samuel's mother. Both had come from Germany as young women in the 1890s, along with a wave of immigrants who went to work on the Florida citrus groves. Barbara married John Silva, Samuel's father, and settled down as a Florida family. Grace married a German, Henry Weber. Grace was an educated woman, rare for the time. In Germany, she had learned folk medicine from her mother, who was a healer in their village. She knew how to prepare remedies with herbs, make ointments for wounds, knew teas for all kinds of ailments. That's why when she arrived in America, she became the person everyone sought when someone got sick or when a woman was giving birth. She wasn't a faith healer like the American women who said prayers and performed rituals. Grace healed with the knowledge she had brought from her homeland. She planted a huge medicinal garden behind the house with German herbs she managed to bring in her luggage, and others she found here that served the same purposes. Chamomile, lemon balm, mint, rosemary, each plant with its specific purpose. Henry, a good carpenter, learned the trade from his father in Germany. He made furniture that lasted generations, knew every type of wood, could carve flowers and figures that seemed alive. The rich families in the region commissioned cabinets, beds, tables, all made by his skillful hands. It was work that brought in good money, much better than common farm labor. The couple had 3 children, but only William survived. The other 2 died young, one from fever, the other during childbirth. Grace suffered greatly from the losses, dedicating herself to the remaining son as if he were 3. William grew up speaking German at home, learned to read and write in both languages, could do mental arithmetic better than many merchants in town. Henry taught his son carpentry in his spare time. William had a knack for it. He knew how to handle tools, but what he really loved was studying. He read all the books he could find, memorized poems, knew how to speak beautifully like an educated person. That's why he got a different job on the Davidson estate, not as a common laborer, but taking care of bookkeeping, controlling incoming and outgoing goods. The Davidson family was one of the wealthiest in the region, owners of thousands of acres of good land for citrus. Anthony Davidson had built his empire from nothing, starting as a drover and becoming a powerful rancher. He was a tough man who had grown rich through determination and force. He could be cruel when necessary, but he also had a business intelligence that few possessed. His wife, Martha Davidson, was the daughter of a citrus magnate, bringing noble European blood that gave prestige to the family. They had 5 children, 3 sons and 2 daughters, all raised to be masters of the land. Anthony Davidson controlled everything in the region without needing a military title. His power came from money, land, and the political influence he had built over the years. Local politicians ate out of his hand, the sheriff obeyed his orders. The judge thought twice before contradicting any of his decisions. He was respected for the fear he instilled, for the wealth he displayed, for the network of favors and threats he had maintained during decades of absolute power. Helena was the youngest daughter, born when her mother was in her early 40s. A pampered girl from childhood, she studied at a boarding school in Orlando, spoke fluent French, played the piano like a professional teacher. She was beautiful enough to make others envious, with wavy brown hair, green eyes that hypnotized any man. At 20, she was considered the most coveted single woman in the entire region. When William began working on the ranch, Helena had just returned from school. She was an educated young lady, read French novels, knew how to embroider, played the piano every afternoon in the large living room. William was fascinated from the first time he saw her descending the grand staircase of the mansion in a blue silk dress that cost more than he earned in a year. For me, hearing all that seemed like something out of a movie, never from real life, and even worse, from my life, it was so much information at once that my head couldn't process it properly. When they discovered that Helena had escaped from the boarding school again, it took 3 days for the enforcers to find her at my true grandparents' house. Someone had tipped them off, as always happened when money was offered for information. They arrived at dawn, 3 armed men pounding on the door like demons. They woke up the whole house, entered without asking permission. Helena was breastfeeding me when they appeared in the room. She clung to me desperately, screaming that she wouldn't go anywhere without her daughter. But there was no discussion. They dragged Helena away by force, leaving me in Grandma Grace's arms. The chief of the enforcers was even polite to my grandparents. He left a substantial sum of money on the table, saying it was to help take care of the child. The only condition was that no one could know that that child was Helena Davidson's daughter. He asked the grandparents to leave the region, to go far away, to raise the girl as if she were an orphan found at their doorstep. He even spoke gently, as if doing everyone a favor. You raise the girl far from here, no one finds out anything, and everyone lives in peace, the man said, putting his weapon back in its holster. The Davidson family doesn't want problems with you, they just want to forget this story ever existed. Grace and Henry believed they had made an honest agreement. They thought they would be able to live peacefully, raise their granddaughter in a distant town, start a new life with that money. But they were too naive to understand how rich families solve problems. My mother, Eleanor, told me that I cried a lot from hunger. I was only 3 days old. I desperately needed to feed, and they didn't know what to do. That's when they remembered my father, Samuel, who was their nephew and lived nearby, and his wife, Eleanor, had small children who were still breastfeeding. Desperate with a 3-day-old baby crying from hunger, my German grandparents ran to their nephew's house, carrying me in their arms. When my mother, Eleanor, saw me there, tiny, blonde, crying like a condemned soul, she said she had never seen a more beautiful child in her life. I looked like a porcelain doll, one of those rich people buy in Orlando. At that time, my mother was breastfeeding and taking care of 3 small boys, all of them young, but when she took me in her arms and saw my desperate hunger, her mother's instinct spoke louder. She put me to her breast without thinking twice, and the milk flowed quickly. I stopped crying immediately. While I was feeding, my grandparents couldn't invent any lies. They were too heartbroken, crying too much, too desperate to pretend it was just a normal situation. Besides, they were blood family, people who had known each other since childhood. How to hide a tragedy of that magnitude? It was at that moment that my father, Samuel, took over the conversation, because until then it had been my mother telling it. He spoke with a sadness that broke his heart. He said that when he learned that his cousin William had been murdered in cold blood, he almost didn't believe it. They had grown up together, played together when they were little. William was like a brother to him. Grace told him, crying, that Helena, even though she was dragged away by force by the enforcers, cried my name, Patricia. It was the name she had given me right when I was born, 3 days earlier, in honor of Saint Rita of Cassia, whom she prayed to every day asking for protection. My father, Samuel, said that when he heard the whole story, he and my mother turned cold with fear. They knew that messing with a powerful family like the Davidsons was dangerous. That night, my grandparents left. They asked to leave me there until they could hire a moving truck. They would leave with me the next day. They promised to pick me up as soon as they organized the trip far away. It was that same night that the tragedy happened. My father, Samuel, woke up early the next morning to someone desperately knocking on the door. It was a neighbor of the Germans who had come to warn that my grandparents' house had caught fire during the night. My father ran there and only found smoking ashes. The house was all made of wood. It had burned like dry paper. Not a single plank was left standing. The bodies of my grandparents were carbonized in the middle of the rubble, unrecognizable, clinging to each other as if they had tried to protect themselves. It was a nightmare scene that my father never managed to forget. Since they had no money saved and there was no family to pay for the burial, the city hall had to take charge. They were buried by the government in a shallow grave in the paupers' cemetery, without a proper coffin, without a mass, without anything. Everyone in the region found out. It was a scandal that lasted for months. They said it had been an accident, that the wood stove had caught fire during the night. But my parents understood immediately that it had been no accident. They had killed my grandparents to ensure the secret died with them. Out of fear of retaliation, they never told anyone that I was not their biological daughter. They raised me as if I had been born in that house, just like my other siblings. The younger children didn't find it strange. To them, I had always been part of the family. That's when one of the attorneys cleared his throat, seeing that my father had stopped speaking. He was looking at us from the window. It was their turn to take over the conversation and explain why they were there. Patricia, the older of the two, said, "We are here representing your biological mother, Helena Davidson." The attorney adjusted his glasses and continued. Your mother sent us here to investigate if you were truly the daughter she had believed to be dead for 30 years. She still doesn't know that you are alive. She is waiting for our confirmation. But after everything your parents have told us, we are certain that you are her daughter. The other attorney took the floor. Let me tell you what happened to Helena after they took her from your German grandparents' house. She returned to the boarding school, this time for good. When she learned that her daughter had died in the fire, along with her grandparents, she had a mental breakdown. She became a nun out of despair, not out of vocation. She spent years in a state of profound melancholy, praying constantly, asking God for forgiveness for her daughter's death. During all those years, he continued, her father, Anthony Davidson, never allowed Martha to visit Helena at the boarding school. He said his daughter had brought dishonor to the family, that she needed to pay for the consequences. Only when he passed away about 6 years ago did Martha send for Helena to return. The mother was already ill, feeling that death was approaching, and wanted to ask her daughter for forgiveness for the years of suffering. She wanted to have her close before she passed. Helena returned home in a deplorable state, very dejected, prematurely aged. The first attorney resumed. The inheritance was divided among all the children. Helena received a considerable portion, but her siblings received the larger share. 2 of them had moved out of state years before and settled there. The others remained, managing the family's businesses in Florida. It was when Helena was trying to resume a normal life that she learned the story through her maid. The merchant who tried to acquire your mansion was married to one of the Davidson mansion employees. When he arrived home, he mentioned to his wife the negotiation he had tried to make with a young lady named Patricia. When I heard my name come from the attorney's mouth, I felt as if I had been shocked. My father, Samuel, sighed deeply, as if the pieces were finally falling into place. The poor man, carrying such a burden on his shoulders his whole life, all because of people who were worthless. The attorney kept talking non-stop, and at this point he even lowered his gaze. The merchant said the lady was of questionable reputation, that she had been a mistress of a land baron. He described that she had blue eyes, light hair, 3 children with no recognized father. The employee, who knew all about her mistress's tragic story of having lost a daughter, became intrigued when her husband mentioned the name Patricia. It was exactly the name Helena had given to the daughter she believed had died in the fire. She immediately ran to tell her mistress what she had heard. Helena was deeply shaken when she heard this, especially because of the name. She began to make urgent inquiries through the maid, asking her husband to go there immediately and bring more details about this Patricia. She wanted to know everything about this person. It was then that she hired us to conduct the investigation, the attorney concluded, and we discovered that the daughter she believed to have died 30 years ago was alive, had survived, and had been raised by another family. My God, how many revelations that day! Honestly, I never imagined that my parents weren't my parents. I looked at Samuel and Eleanor with tears in my eyes. These 2 had raised me like their legitimate daughter. They never made any distinction between me and their other 8 children. All of us suffered hardship equally. How many nights did I go to sleep with only water and sugar in my stomach? How many times did I carry heavy bundles of clothes that I could barely lift? They shared their love and their poverty with me, without me even knowing that I wasn't their blood. But along with all this confusion came a terrible sadness. To discover that I had always complained about my life, thinking I was the unluckiest woman in the world, but my real mother suffered as much as I did, or even worse. She lost the love of her life, murdered in front of her eyes. She was forced to give me up when I was 3 days old. She spent 30 years thinking I had died in a fire because of her. I, at least, had my children with me the whole time. Thank God no one took my little ones from me. I was able to see them grow up, breastfeed each one, comfort them when they cried. The attorney told me while I was reflecting, Helena is very eager to meet you and your grandchildren. My children were clinging to me, confused by the whole story. They looked at me strangely, as if I was going to transform into someone else. The attorney said that she lived only a few miles away, and if we wished, we could go with them by car. When the attorney said that, my heart almost jumped out of my mouth. To meet my real mother, just like that, so suddenly? I looked at my parents, who were standing there, not knowing whether to be sad or happy. "Father, Mother," I said, getting up from the chair, "do you give me your blessing to go?" My father approached, put his hand on my head with that affectionate way of his. "Go with God, my daughter. You deserve to meet your blood mother." My more dramatic mother hugged me tightly, crying uncontrollably. "Just don't forget us, okay? You'll always be my daughter of the heart, my beautiful girl. I will never ever forget you," I promised, my voice choked. The grandchildren hugged their grandparents, promising that they wouldn't let anyone replace them. I took the children by the hand, and we all went out together. At the door, the attorney's car awaited us. It was a shiny black Cadillac, imposing. The only car I had seen up close in my life was James's, but I had never been inside one. To me and the children, that machine was something from another world. They clung to me, wide-eyed, touching the shiny bodywork with curiosity and fear. When we sat in the car, no one could hold back. Every face I looked at was laughing, including mine. It was so soft, with leather, fragrant, more comfortable than any furniture I had ever sat on. The two attorneys got in the front, and the four of us squeezed into the back seat. Marcus on one side, Olivia in the middle, me by the window with Aiden on my lap. "Is this the first time you've ridden in a car?" the younger attorney asked, smiling. "It's the first time any of us have ridden in a car," I replied, still half in disbelief. "I apologize," I said, realizing I had been impolite with all the commotion back home. "I didn't pay proper attention when you introduced yourselves. What are your names, sirs?" "Don't worry, Patricia. It's natural to be nervous with so many revelations," the elder said, smiling compassionately. "I am Dr. Raoul Peterson, and this is my son, Dr. Francis Peterson. We have worked together in the family's office for years. My father discovered the first clues to your story. Doctor," Francis explained. "When Helena hired us, he scoured county clerks' offices and old records until he found the connection to your family. Your mother barely slept when we learned that you might be alive," Dr. Raoul said. "She spent the whole night asking questions, wanting to know everything about you all." The road to the Davidson estate was a dirt road, but smooth and well-maintained. We passed huge gates, fences that stretched out of sight, pastures with fat cattle grazing peacefully. It was truly another world, a world of people who had always had everything. Marcus was quiet the whole trip, but I could see in his eyes that he was processing all that wealth. Olivia and Aiden pointed at everything they saw: beautiful horses, enormous corrals, workers who tipped their hats when the car passed. After about an hour, the grand mansion appeared amidst the trees. My goodness, what a house that was. 2 stories, a huge porch with white columns, a garden that looked like something out of a magazine. There was even a fountain at the entrance with running water making noise. "Is this where your mother lives?" Olivia asked, open-mouthed. "Looks like it, daughter," I replied, just as impressed as she was. The car drove up a stone-paved driveway until it stopped right in front of the main staircase. Before the engine even turned off, the house door opened, and a woman appeared on the porch. It was her. I knew immediately it was my mother. Helena quickly descended the steps, almost running towards the car. She wore an elegant navy blue dress. When she got close to the car, she stopped for a second, standing there, looking through the window, trying to see me inside. Her hands trembled with emotion. Her eyes were already wet with tears. Dr. Raoul got out first, opened our door. I slowly stepped out with Aiden still in my arms, my legs trembling nervously. Marcus and Olivia stayed glued to me, one on each side. Helena took 2 decisive steps in my direction and stopped. She studied me from head to toe with eyes shining with emotion, as if she were trying to find the 3-day-old baby she had lost in the 30-year-old woman standing in front of her. "Patricia," she whispered, her voice broken. "Yes," I replied, barely able to speak. That's when she opened her arms and came towards me, crying like a child. "My daughter, my dearest daughter," she cried, embracing me with all the strength she had. The hug was desperate, of someone who had waited so long for that moment. She smelled of expensive perfume, fine soap, things I didn't even know existed. But beneath all that, there was the smell of a mother, that smell that instantly calmed me as if my heart had always known. We cried, embraced there in the middle of that beautiful garden, she repeating my name non-stop, me unable to say a word. "Let me look at you properly," she said, holding me by the shoulders and pulling me back a little. "My God, how beautiful you are. Just like your father, his eyes, his hair." She ran her hand over my face as if trying to memorize every detail, as if she were afraid I would disappear again. "And these are my grandchildren?" she asked, looking at the children who were clinging to me. "Yes, they are," I managed to say. "Marcus, Olivia, and Aiden." Helena approached them, took each of their faces in her hands, kissed their foreheads, cried even more. "How beautiful you are! How beautiful!" she repeated. Come inside. You must be tired from the journey." We climbed that marble staircase as if we were entering a palace. Marcus stepped carefully. Olivia looked at everything with her mouth open. Aiden clung to me even tighter. Inside the house, it was even more impressive. Enormous chandeliers hanging from the ceiling, furniture that looked like museum pieces, thick carpets that our feet sank into. There were maids, dressed like dolls, curtsying as we passed. Sit, Helena said, pointing to a sofa that could fit the whole family. "Do you want anything? Water? Juice?" The children must be hungry. It was strange to be treated like an important guest in a house that cost more than anything I had ever seen in my life. But at the same time, the way Helena looked at me was truly motherly, of someone who had loved me from the first second I existed. "I can't believe you're here," she said, sitting next to me and holding my hand. 30 years I prayed for this moment. 30 years asking God for forgiveness for letting you die. "You didn't let anything happen, Mom," I said. "You were forced, you had no choice." When I called her Mom, Helena broke down crying again. It was what she most wanted to hear in her life, that word coming from my mouth. "Tell me everything," she asked. "I want to know about every day of your life, how these 30 years were, how you were raised, your family." And there, in that luxurious living room, with my children, I began to tell our story from the beginning. The attorneys reinforced everything I said. She barely believed every word that came out of my mouth. But of course, I didn't tell her every sordid detail, precisely because the children didn't know the half of it. Afterwards, she also told us about her life with my father, William. And even though I had already heard everything before, it was as if I was hearing it all for the first time. The love between them began slowly, through exchanged glances when he would deliver reports to the mansion. Helena pretended she was reading but spied on William through the library window. He, who knew how to speak beautifully, began to leave hidden notes among the papers he delivered. She replied with perfumed letters written in a delicate handwriting of a refined young lady. She cried so much that she couldn't even speak properly. She kept touching my face, my arms, as if she still couldn't believe I was really there. The tears flowed non-stop, wetting her beautiful dress. It wasn't long before it got dark, when suddenly we smelled a very pleasant scent of food coming from the house. A young, well-dressed woman appeared, in a maid's uniform, whom I immediately saw cast an interested glance at Dr. Francis. The young man looked a bit awkward, adjusted his tie. I, being clever, immediately understood everything. The two had something special. "Helena, dinner is served," she said politely, but still looking sideways at the attorney. "Oh yes, Lucy, thank you," Helena replied, drying her eyes. The two attorneys looked at each other, and Dr. Raoul said they needed to leave. "If we don't get home for dinner, my wife will be worried," he explained, smiling. "It's already late, and the way back is long." Of course, thank you very much for everything," Helena thanked them. "You brought the greatest gift of my life. I'll pay you a bonus." After they left, delighted, Helena took us to dinner. My goodness, what a table that was. Embroidered tablecloth, porcelain plates, crystal glasses that sparkled like diamonds. There was food I didn't even know the name of, all fragrant, all beautiful to look at. My mouth watered just from the smell, and we truly indulged. There was no way to hide it. Marcus filled his plate 3 times. Olivia tried everything. Aiden ate with both hands like a hungry child. I tried to have more composure, but I couldn't resist either. It had been so long since we had eaten such good, plentiful food. Helena stayed there, all elegant, eating slowly with a fork and knife, in the proper way, observing us with a smile on her face. She didn't frown or comment on our simple manners. On the contrary, she seemed happy to see that we were enjoying ourselves. "Eat all you want," she would say constantly. "I want to see you well fed." The maid, Lucy, came in and out, serving more food, and each time she peeked out the window to see if the attorney's car was still on the road. After dinner, when we were all satisfied and more than full, Helena got up from the table with that smile that never left her face. "Now, I'm going to show you where you'll sleep," she said anxiously. "I've prepared everything with great care." We went up that beautiful staircase to the second floor. Helena opened the first door, and my eyes almost popped out of my head. It was a room larger than my entire living room, with an enormous bed covered in white sheets that looked like clouds. There were even paintings on the walls and silk curtains. "This one is for you, Marcus," she said to my oldest son. "And here's your private bathroom." She opened a small door nearby, and inside there was a white porcelain bathtub, a large mirror, faucets that gleamed like silver. Marcus was open-mouthed. He had never seen such luxury. "Each room has its own bathroom," Helena explained, seeing our astonished faces. "For you to have privacy." Olivia's room was decorated entirely in pink, with porcelain dolls on the shelf and a dressing table with a mirror. My daughter was enchanted, touching everything carefully, as if it would break. My Olivia always had a delicate way about her. Aiden's little room was the cutest, with wooden toys scattered around and a small bed with stuffed animal sheets. My youngest jumped onto the bed immediately, laughing with joy. He asked if he could jump, already jumping. "This is your room, my daughter?" Helena said, opening the last door. It was the most beautiful of all. A canopy bed, an intricately carved wooden dresser, an upholstered chair by the window. The bathroom even had a bathtub with golden feet. It was truly something out of a princess's dream. "Mom, this is all too much for me," I said, not knowing if I deserved so much luxury. "Nothing is too much for my found daughter," she replied, hugging me again. "For 30 years I dreamed of being able to take care of you. Now I want to make up for all the lost time." That night, each in our palace room, with our own bathroom and everything, I could barely sleep from so much emotion. It was as if we had entered a fairy tale. In the middle of the night, Aiden came to my bed. I almost jumped out of bed from fright. He said he heard strange noises, just a small, needy boy's imagination. "What noises, my love?" I asked, pulling him under the silk covers. "There are people walking in the hallway, Mom, and the wind makes the window bang hard, hard." He stammered, hiding completely. "It's just the big house, son. A big house makes different noises than our little house," I explained, stroking his hair. "It's very windy here because it's on a hill, and the hallways are long." Aiden slept clinging to me the rest of the night. The next day, during breakfast at an enormous mahogany table that could easily seat 15 people, Helena announced that she wanted to talk about our future. "I want you all to stay here with me forever," she said, her eyes shining with happiness. "This house is too big for a single woman. You have brought life to these walls that were dead for years." The children clapped with joy. Olivia even got up from her chair to hug her grandmother. Marcus, always more serious, asked about their grandparents, Samuel and Eleanor. "And our grandparents, Helena? They'll be sad if we disappear. We'll take care of them too," Helena replied, moved by the boys' concern. "They raised my daughter with love. Now they are my family too." A week later, Helena enrolled the 3 children in St. Jude's Academy, the most expensive and reputable school in the region. It was where the children of the wealthiest ranchers, important politicians, and prosperous merchants studied. The uniform alone cost more than I earned in an entire month crocheting. Marcus was a bit embarrassed in the first few days. He was used to fighting with rich kids in public school. Now he was studying side by side with them. He would come home telling the news, wide-eyed. "Mom, the boys in my class have their own drivers who pick them up in cars, and a friend of mine said he got a horse for his birthday." He would tell at dinner, still disbelieving. Olivia adapted like a fish to water. My girl was born for that refined life. In 2 weeks, She had already made friends with the daughters of high society, who were enchanted by her blonde hair and blue eyes. She would come home talking about piano lessons, French embroidery, social etiquette. "Mom, the teacher said I have a natural talent for the piano," she would tell, all proud. "And in French class, I'm the one who pronounces best." Aiden, being the youngest at only 8 years old, naturally blended in with the other children. At that age, they didn't care about social differences. They just wanted to play in the enormous courtyard, run through the college gardens, play ball on the grassy field. For me, Helena hired Mrs. Dubois, a retired French woman who had worked as a governess for the best families in New York and Washington, D.C. She was a distinguished woman in her 60s who arrived every afternoon at 2 o'clock sharp, always wearing a dark dress and carrying a leather briefcase with books and notebooks. "Patricia, today we will work on verb conjugation in the present tense," she would say with that heavy French accent, treating me with the same politeness she dedicated to the daughters of citrus magnates. When she called me Patricia, I had to bite my tongue not to laugh in her face. "Patricia, how funny!" I would hold back during the entire class, serious as an applied student. But when I was alone in the room, I would laugh like a fool. "Patricia," I would repeat, imitating her accent, and burst into laughter. If anyone saw me talking to myself and laughing for no reason, they would think I had gone crazy. Now I'll confess how difficult it was to learn to read properly at 32. A woman sitting at a desk like a 5-year-old child, learning to put letters together, forming simple words like house, cat, flower. My fingers could barely hold the pencil properly to write the cursive letters that Mrs. Dubois taught. But Helena always encouraged me in moments of discouragement. "My daughter, you have an intelligence I have never seen. In 3 months, you are already reading entire sentences, something that would take a normal person a year." It was true. My mind absorbed those lessons like a dry sponge absorbs water after a long time in the sun. I was hungry for knowledge, to understand those scribbles on paper that held thoughts, stories, feelings. In 6 months, I could already read the Orlando newspaper that arrived every week. In a year, I was devouring the books in the immense library that the family had. During these first few months living in the mansion, Helena, now I'll refer to her as Mom, okay? It's about time, isn't it? Well, Mom made a point of showing me every corner of that palace. The library with over 3,000 books in English, French, German, and even some in Spanish. The music room with a German grand piano that cost a fortune. The gardens with flowers I didn't even know existed in the world. The ballroom with crystal chandeliers that came from Europe. But there was one place in the house that Helena avoided as if it were haunted. Every time we passed by the corridor on the 2nd floor, she would avert her gaze from a specific door at the end, always quickening her pace when she got near. One day, driven by curiosity, I took advantage of her having gone to town and opened that mysterious door. It was a large room with heavy furniture covered in dusty white sheets. From the photographs scattered on the wall and the objects on the dresser, I immediately realized it was Grandpa Anthony Davidson's room. There were portraits of him as a young man, of his wedding with Martha, of the whole family gathered. A cane leaning against the wall, books on the table, clothes still kept in the closet. It was as if he had left there yesterday and would return at any moment. But I got lost in time there in that place, when suddenly I heard, "Patricia!" Mom's voice cut through the silence like a razor. She was at the door, white as a sheet, trembling like a leaf. "Get out of there right now." When I stepped out of the room and looked closely at Mom, her hands were trembling so much. "I'm sorry, Mom, I didn't know I couldn't enter," I said, startled by her reaction. No, it's not that you can't," she managed to say, leaning against the wall to keep from falling. "It's that I've never been able to enter that place since I returned to this house from the convent. I've never set foot in there. Just looking at that door gives me a terrible malaise, shortness of breath, a racing heart." I saw that she was truly unwell. Her face had turned gray. She was sweating cold, breathing with difficulty. I helped her down to the living room, called Lucy to bring some calming tea. "My father hurt me a lot, daughter," she whispered when she felt a little better. "Many things that I can't forget, no matter how hard I try. That room brings back memories I prefer to keep buried. I will get keys for this room. I don't want the children going in there. One day, on a rainy afternoon, as we were in the large living room talking about the children's progress in school, Mom decided to explain to me properly about the family inheritance situation. "Daughter, I want you to understand well how things turned out after my father died," she began, taking some papers from a desk drawer. "This mansion with all the furniture, the surrounding lands, the corrals, the citrus groves, all of this is registered in my name at the county clerk's office. When my father made his will, he divided the assets among his 5 children, but he left this specific property to me." I was surprised. "Why did he do that, Mom?" "I think it was his way of trying to ask for forgiveness for the years he forced me to stay in the convent," she sighed, looking out the window. "He knew that this was always my favorite house, where I was happy in childhood, where I met your father. My siblings got the other, larger ranches, the businesses in Orlando, the houses in Miami, the bank stocks. Deep down, I think they didn't care much for this property." It was in that same conversation that Helena said something that deeply moved me. "Patricia, I want you to know that you can ask me for anything in this world. Money, properties, jewelry, trips, everything within my reach. I have 30 years of accumulated affection to compensate. It was the opportunity I had been waiting for." I gathered courage and made the request that had been stuck in my throat for weeks. "Mom, could you do a very big favor for me?" "Anything, my daughter. Speak." "I wanted you to buy a good house for my parents, Samuel and Eleanor. They spent their whole lives working for others, living in borrowed houses, suffering hardship. After everything they did for me, they deserve to have comfort in their last years of life." Helena's eyes filled with tears immediately. She got up from the armchair and came to hug me tightly. "What a grateful and kind daughter I have. Of course. We will choose the best property available in the region. They saved you. They brought back my greatest joy. There is no money in the world that can pay for that. And that's exactly what we did." Helena sent Dr. Raoul and Dr. Francis Peterson to look for the best properties for sale within a 20-mile radius. 2 weeks later, they returned with the deeds to a beautiful ranch of 50 acres, with a real grand house, fertile land for planting, good pasture for cattle, a crystal-clear creek running through the property. When we took my parents to see their new house, it was one of the most emotional scenes of my life. It was a shame that back then there were no cell phones to record such a beautiful moment. My adoptive father stood on the porch, looking at the lands that stretched out of sight, crying like a child. "This is a dream, girl," he said, running his hand over the porch columns. "A house for rich people, good land for planting, dairy cattle in the pasture. I never imagined I would have this in my life." My mother ran through the whole house like a girl at Christmas, opening every door, touching every piece of furniture. "There's a bathroom inside the house, Patricia, a gas stove, a refrigerator just like at Helena's house. And look how huge this kitchen is. The whole family fits." Their move was a party that lasted the entire day. My mother Helena made sure to prepare a lavish lunch for my entire reunited family. It was the first time she really got to know each of my siblings, each sister-in-law, each nephew. She treated everyone like beloved relatives, not as inferior people. I took advantage of the family being together to share with them the good fortune that had fallen upon our lives. My old house, the one the land baron had left for me, I gave as a gift to Francesca and her family. They had been living cramped in a 2-room house. Now they would have space for their children to grow up properly. Joseph, who was on rented land struggling, received a good 20-acre property. Anthony, who was living rent-free at his in-laws' house, received a small piece of land, but enough to start his own life with his wife and children. Isaac and Peter, the 2 youngest, who had gone to try their luck in Orlando, we sent money through the bank so they could study a profession and have better opportunities. Francesca, besides the house, received a good amount to set up a sewing business and support her family. "I want to see your whole family well established," my mother Helena would always repeat. "They took care of what I had most precious in the world when I couldn't do it." During this first year living in the mansion, one thing that struck me was that I barely thought about James or his family. I learned through Francesca that they had sold all the remaining properties from the land baron's inheritance and moved to Miami. I never would have imagined that. I thought they would be eternal owners of that place. I believe that all the residents of the region even set off fireworks out of sheer joy. It seems that Catherine couldn't bear to live in the same region after she discovered that I had become rich and respected, the owner of one of the largest mansions in the area, with children studying at the best school. The proud old woman preferred to leave rather than have to greet me on the street as an equal. Of course, these were just rumors, but I'll never know. And I confess to you, I felt a small pang in my heart when I heard about their move, but that was all. James had shown exactly who he was when he offered for me to be his hidden mistress in a distant city. I deserved something much better than that, and now I had found it. It was almost a year after our arrival at the mansion that my mother Helena showed me something that changed my life forever. On a rainy winter afternoon, as we were in the library and I was reading a novel, my mother Helena appeared, carrying a carved wooden box that I had never seen. "Daughter, I think you are ready to meet your true father," she said, her voice choked with emotion. When she opened the box, inside were dozens and dozens of letters, all written in neat handwriting, a mix of German and English. The paper was yellowed by time, but every word could still be read perfectly. "I managed to hide these letters from my father when he discovered our courtship," Mom explained, touching the letters gently. "When I returned to this house, they were there in the same place I left them, in the basement." I picked up the first letter, my hands trembling with emotion. Now that I knew how to read properly, I could finally get to know my father through his own words, the feelings he had written to my mother. "My dearest Helena," one of them began in neat handwriting, "your eyes are like stars that illuminate my darkness. When I am away from you, I count the minutes until I can see you again. You brought light to a life that was only work and loneliness." I cried, reading every word. I discovered through those letters that my father was a romantic, intelligent, dreamy man. He spoke of the plans he had for our family, of the little house he wanted to build in a distant town, of the children he hoped to have with my mother Helena. "One day our son or daughter will read these letters," he had written in one of them, "and they will know that they were conceived in the greatest love that ever existed on this earth. I will teach them the 2 languages I know. I will show them the world through books. I will give them all the opportunities that I didn't have." I spent the entire night reading those letters alone in my room. It was through them that I truly came to know William Weber, that I saw how different he was from all the men who had passed through my life. I realized that I had inherited from him the love of reading, the curiosity about the world, the stubbornness to fight for what I believed in. It was reading those letters that I fully understood the importance of learning to read properly. How many important things I had missed by not knowing how to read for 30 years. The next day, after reading the letters, my mother, Helena, during breakfast, made us a mysterious proposal. "Daughter, there's a place I want to take you to see. It's a surprise. I can only say it has to do with your story, with your father, William." My heart pounded. Mom was different, anxious, as if she were holding something very important. Throughout the entire car trip, she remained silent, looking out the window, holding a key in her hands. We stopped on a road I didn't know, in front of a small stone building hidden among old trees. It looked like an abandoned workshop, but it had been renovated with a new roof. "Mom, what is this place?" I asked, getting out of the car. Mom didn't answer, just smiled with teary eyes and walked to the wooden door. The children followed me, curious and quiet, feeling that something special was about to happen. "Close your eyes." We all obeyed. I heard the sound of the key in the lock, the door creaking as it opened. Mom took my hand and guided me inside. We entered in single file. The smell of aged wood filled my nose. "Now you can open them." When I opened my eyes, the world stopped. We were in a carpenter's workshop, but it looked like a hidden treasure. Old tools hanging on the walls, pieces of wood organized and scattered around the room. Magnificent furniture, as if someone had frozen time. But what brought tears to my eyes was what was in the center of the workshop, a breathtaking dressing table. Dark, shiny wood, a perfect oval mirror, drawers crafted like works of art, and right in the center, perfectly engraved, a heart surrounded by delicate flowers with the letters H and W intertwined inside. "My God," I whispered, approaching as if it were a dream. "Your grandfather Henry made this for me," Mom cried. "It was my wedding gift for when I became William's wife." I ran my trembling fingers over the carved heart. Every flower, every leaf, every curve had been made with infinite love. Henry had poured all his hope and joy into that piece of furniture, dreaming of the day he would see it in his son's house. "Grandpa made this?" Olivia whispered, touching the flowers that looked real. "How beautiful," Marcus murmured, running his hand over the wood. The entire workshop told a story of interrupted love. A half-finished dining table, chairs waiting for their finish, even a small crib decorated with little angels. He was furnishing the entire house for us, Mom explained, opening a drawer in the dressing table. At that moment, in that exact place, I understood that true love never dies, even after tragedy, fire, years. Those pieces of furniture held all the affection my grandfather had prepared for a life that never happened. We made that place a sanctuary. The years flew by living in the mansion. The children grew up quickly, becoming educated and refined young adults. Marcus graduated from high school and wanted to study law in Orlando, just as James had done years before. Olivia became interested in literature and music, playing the piano like a professional. Aiden, the youngest, showed a natural talent for managing land and business, wanting to take care of the family properties in the future. I became a respected lady in the region. I participated in the charity galas of high society women, organized parties at the mansion to raise funds for the orphanage and the city hospital, helped needy families with money and food. The same women who once despised me and called me a tramp now greeted me on the street with reverence, competed for my presence at social events. Mom was completely fulfilled, seeing that she had managed to give me everything she had always dreamed of. We had become true mother and daughter, companions, confidants, friends. She taught me about social etiquette, fashion, refined culture. I took care of her when she got sick, and she took care of me. We traveled, just the two of us sometimes. It was at a charity gala we organized at the mansion to raise funds for the city orphanage when I was 41 years old that my life took another unexpected turn. Mom had sent invitations to all of the region's high society. The party was lively, with an orchestra playing in the ballroom, tables laden with fine food, women wearing their best dresses. The party was already in full swing when a man arrived alone, after all the other guests. He was tall, elegant, wearing a well-tailored dark suit, but he had an air of profound sadness that was noticeable just by looking at him. He greeted some acquaintances politely but mostly stayed in a corner of the ballroom, observing everything with a melancholic gaze. "Who is that man over there?" I asked Mom, intrigued by the solitary figure. "Edward Davis, Jr.," she replied softly. "A very rich family, owners of several large ranches in the region. He became a widower about 8 years ago and never remarried. It seems he loved his wife very much, and now he has just lost his mother too. Poor man, he was very attached to her. She should be here with him." During the party, I noticed that Edward looked at me occasionally, but it wasn't a malicious or self-interested look. It was a respectful, almost melancholic gaze of someone who recognized in my expression the same sadness he carried in his own heart. It was Mom, always decisive and with no filter, who took the initiative to introduce us. She went to Edward and brought him over to talk to me. "Edward, I want to introduce you to my daughter, Patricia. She organizes these charity galas and is one of the most respected ladies in our society." When he greeted me, kissing my hand with the politeness typical of a well-bred man, our eyes met, and I felt something completely different from anything I had ever experienced in my life. It wasn't the wild and dangerous passion I had felt for James in my youth. It was something much deeper and serene, a connection between two people who had suffered significant losses, who knew the pain of loneliness, who knew how to value the true things in life. Edward Davis, Jr., at 50 years old, was a man who carried the natural elegance of someone born into privilege, but also the humility of someone who had faced painful losses. We talked for most of the party, and I discovered that he was a cultured person who had traveled through Europe, spoke fluent French, and was knowledgeable in art and literature. Edward began to visit me frequently after that party, always respectful, always polite, bringing flowers from his ranch garden, books he thought I would like, fine sweets from Orlando. It wasn't haste or desperation. It was the patient courtship of a mature man who knew how to value what he had found. Our courtship lasted months. My children grew fond of him. Edward treated Marcus, Olivia, and Aidan as if they were his legitimate children. He never made any distinction, never showed prejudice. Of course, I told him my entire story. He knew perfectly well that my 3 children came from abuse. When he asked me to marry him on a spring afternoon, I was 43 years old, and I had finally found the true love I deserved. The ceremony was simple but elegant, in the ranch chapel, with my mother Helena beaming with happiness, my grown children giving me their blessing, and my parents Samuel and Eleanor crying with joy to see me truly happy. Edward was the husband every woman deserves, affectionate without being overly sentimental, present without being clingy, respectful of my past without asking painful questions. He knew my story through my mother Helena. He knew everything I had been through, and he loved me not despite my past, but including it. He said I was a strong, courageous survivor, and that he felt honored to be able to take care of me. We had 30 years of blessed marriage. Edward passed away in 2017. It broke my heart, but it was a good death, without suffering, surrounded by love. We buried him in the family plot next to his mother, in the same cemetery where my mother Helena was, who had passed away 3 years earlier at 91 years old. My children fulfilled their dreams in life, each in their own way. Today, at 79 years old, I live alone in this same mansion where I was so happy. I have 12 grandchildren, 6 great-grandchildren, a huge family that visits me every week. When it's not one, it's another, but there's always someone in these corridors. I am the respected matriarch of one of the most traditional families in the region. I still keep my father William's letters. The dressing table that my grandfather Henry made for my mother is in my room. I use it every day to brush my white hair. I regret nothing, not even the suffering with the land baron. I wouldn't have my children if that hadn't happened, for he was the only man who made me a mother. Nor do I regret the illusion with James, nor the years of poverty in my childhood. Everything brought me here, to this full life of love, respect, and dignity that I managed to build. If it were today, with the laws that exist now, perhaps many things would have been different. The land baron would have been arrested. In fact, a land baron wouldn't even exist. I would have had my rights. My children would have been recognized. But back then, a woman had no choice. She was her father's property, then her husband's, and if God had no mercy, she ended up being the property of any man who had enough power to take her. As I told you in the beginning, God knows I suffered, but I also know I sinned, and we are who we are, but we also choose who we become. This is my story, complete and honest. If you've listened this far, I hope it has touched your heart in some way. Remember that no matter how dark the night seems, dawn always comes. No matter how deep the pain, healing is possible. And most importantly, we always have the power to choose who we become, despite what life throws at us.